The story begins in the emergency room with a voice calling for the doctor saying that a patient is having difficulty breathing and that he should be given the ventilator. The patient's name is Jin Lashan, and he is also a mechanical engineer. Due to overwork, his heart suffered a heart attack, and now he is on the verge of losing his life. Shortly after he was born, his parents died in a car accident, and he became an orphan. After graduating, he spent 20 years at the company, living a nightmare with an extremely low salary. He was single all his life and never held a girl's hand. The protagonist wonders what the point of it all is when someone approaches him, asking if he can hear them and calling him again. They are the nurses, telling him to use the defibrillator immediately. Jin thinks he feels so tired and decides to sleep for now. The next day, someone is lying in bed, wondering if this is a hospital and how much a luxurious room like this would cost, until he notices a system message welcoming him to the magical continent of Eldera. The protagonist, confused, asks what this is. He's still somewhat dazed. He looks to the side and widens his eyes when he sees his reflection in the mirror, wondering what is happening and why his appearance has changed. A week later, the protagonist is sitting in his chair when someone enters. It is his subordinate, calling him Master Rein and saying that his tea is ready. The protagonist thanks her and thinks that after about a week, he has understood his new position. He was reincarnated and became this man named Rein Edgar. He is the third son of Grand Duke Alfira Edgar, with one brother and one sister, and remembers when they were at the dinner table and his brother insisted on eating and not going hungry while growing, telling him to drink this because he spent a lot on this magical water, and if he drank it, it could increase his magical power. In the present time, a lady arrives saying that this is the new coat his mother made for him and to try it on to see if it fits. Rein is the youngest son of the family and therefore loved by everyone. He smiles and wonders if this is some sort of remedy for his terrible past life. This continent is called Eldria, a world where all facilities depend on magic to function. The Caradorial Empire is the largest human empire on this continent. On the continent, there are not only human nations, but also other races, such as elves and dwarves. The Edgar family is a noble family with a territory of about 300,000 square kilometers and approximately 1 million subjects. Someone serves him water. As a noble, the young master not only has expensive clothes, but also a personal maid to serve him. He thinks that living such a happy life must be the result of the hard work of his past life. The subordinate says that the Lord has something to discuss with him and asks him to follow her. In another room, the subordinate approaches the door and says, "The boy has arrived." The Lord tells her to let him in. The protagonist says he is there. Aldarian asks if he knows why he called him. This is his father and also the Lord of this land. Rein replies that he does not know. The Lord says that he has reached the age to manage his own territory and asks if he has decided where he would like to go. The young master asks about inheriting a territory and his father replies, of course. He walks to the map and says that the territory he will take over in the future is in the northwest. Although it is relatively safe due to the shortage of mages, the problem of food production has been difficult to solve. And although the land is safe for now, the future of the Caradorial Empire is not so optimistic. The protagonist thinks that, indeed, what his father said is very true. The royal family of the Caradorial Empire is in decline and political corruption is rampant. Open and hidden conflicts among the various lords of the empire are countless. In this world, after his reincarnation, he has experienced care and attention like never before, and will never lose the people who care about him. Aldarian wonders if he is putting too much pressure on him, and says he does not need to feel pressured, as his older brother, older sister, and himself. Rein interrupts, asking if solving the food problem will improve the territory's security. His father replies that food issues cannot be solved with enthusiasm alone, and it needs to be done gradually, thinking that, as expected, he is still just a child thinking the problem is too simple. The young master thinks he is not relying only on passion, but on centuries of human industrial revolution wisdom, and says to leave the food problem to him. City of Iceling, the westernmost land of Grand Duke Aldarian's territory, bordering to the north the lands of the enemy Grand Duke Sorin, to the west the territory of the elves, and to the south the vast ocean. Due to its location at the intersection of three nations, the city of Iceling is often engulfed in the flames of war. Frequent wars turned what was once fertile land into barren soil and the population decreased, with people barely surviving. Elsewhere, a carriage is passing by and the protagonist is inside with his maid. He's looking over some papers and thinks that the prerequisite for an industrial revolution is a sufficient labor force, so he needs to find a way to increase the population. One surprising thing is that it seems he has acquired some kind of skill. The system notifies the host to use the scanning skill on a person, and with this skill, he can clearly observe the statistics of the scanned individual. Rein thinks that by testing it on his family, he gained a rough understanding of the people in this world, and it seems his priority upon arriving in the territory is to recruit talented individuals. The maid recalls being told by the Lord to personally keep an eye on him and make sure he doesn't cause trouble in the territory, to which she had replied that she understood. In the present, the subordinate thinks that he had better not cause trouble. In the city of Iceling, at the mansion of the city lord, a young man says he heard that the youngest son of the Grand Duke will be arriving in the city today and asks if they should act first. The lord replies that there are rumors that Grand Duke Aldarion not only spoils this youngest son extremely, but the young man adds that even his brother and sister dote on him. The lord says to wait for the master's next instructions before taking any action. The young man asks about him discovering their tax and financial fraud. The lord says that a spoiled young master like him wouldn't understand fiscal and financial records. So, as soon as he arrives, they should show him some random accounts to confuse him. Based on the time, he should be arriving soon, and they should go greet him. The young man agrees, and the lord thinks it's time for Aldarion to pay for his crimes. Meanwhile, the two get out of the carriage, and the protagonist thinks that, as he imagined, due to the lack of population, land that was once cultivable has become desolate and asks her to give him the map of this area. Leah hands it over, and Rain thinks that if they could divert the river to the west and build a canal connecting it to the southern port, until he hears someone telling their father to stop gambling. He looks to the side and sees a girl kneeling on the ground, telling her father to stop betting because the money is for her mother's treatment. Her father, very irritated, orders her to give him the money, saying he has to win this time, insisting she hand it over because he is sure to win. His daughter refuses, saying it is for her mother's treatment. He threatens that if she doesn't give the money, he will hit her. At that moment, someone clenches their fist. It's the young master who punches him in the face, knocking him to the ground. The protagonist stares at him and says that hurt. The maid tells him to wait and that if he intends to hit someone next time, he should warn her in advance so she can prepare protective gear. Rain replies that it was an impulsive act and there was no time to wait, and asks her to check the girl's condition because he's going to have a word with that scum. The man is on the ground holding his face. The young master approaches him and asks about using the money meant for his family's survival to gamble and even hitting his daughter if he has lost his mind. The man asks who he is. The protagonist replies that who he is doesn't matter and warns that if he hears he went to the casino again, he will have someone cut off his head asking if he understood. The man runs away, saying he won't do it again and will never gamble again. Rain asks the girl if she's okay and thinks he'll check her physical condition using the system. The girl thanks him and says that if the money for her mother's treatment had been taken, she wouldn't know what to do. The young master watches her in surprise. Upon seeing her stats, he finds her name is Lillian A. Lore. She is 17 years old, and although her stats are not high, she has a natural affinity for agriculture and needs to be recruited. She will be essential for farming in the future. He tells her that since she is going to the city to find a doctor for her mother, she can ride in the carriage with them, as they are also heading to the city. Lillian says she's dirty and would soil his carriage. The protagonist replies that it's just a few wooden boards put together as transportation. Cleanliness doesn't matter, and besides, he wants to ask her something. How, with such severe poverty, can there be a casino there? Last autumn, the Grand Duke of the enemy nation Soren attacked the city, causing the death of many soldiers. This spring, a major flood destroyed much of the land and crops. The citizens' lives became hell, and even getting a meal became difficult. As they walk through the city, Rain thinks he needs to conduct a census to find out how much productive labor they have. They first head to the property of the lord of the city of Iceling to see how much reserve money is available to use as development funds. He asks if she knows where the city lord's estate is. Ilore replies that the estate is located until someone approaches on horseback, telling them to get out of the way, calling them peasants, and ordering them to disappear from his sight immediately. The maid pushes her master aside, telling him to be careful. The rider speeds past on his horse, shouting for people to move. Leah glares as he passes, then notices she's holding onto him and asks if he is hurt or feeling pain anywhere. The young master replies that, thanks to her, he's fine, and asks if she knows who that was. Lillian answers that the man is the young master of the Edwin family, and that all the casinos in the city of Iceling belong to them. The protagonist asks about all the casinos in the city and whether that means they must be rich. Ilore says yes. Rain smiles, thinking that's great. He was worried about where to get development funds from. He tells her to take them to the casino. Lillian warns him not to go there, saying that if they do, the casino will take all his money. The young master reassures her not to worry, as the casino cannot beat him. Ilore watches him, wondering how powerful he really is. Elsewhere, they approach a door guarded by two men, and the protagonist thinks to himself to wait until they're defeated by his industrialized production line. He enters the casino, where there are many people, one of whom is asking for 10 gold coins, saying he'll win it back and promising to repay. Another boy says he's won. People are calling red. Rain looks around, thinking that as long as casinos exist, people will never truly work. The maid says soldiers have already surrounded the casino and asks if he wants to act now. The young master tells her to wait for the big fish first. A staff member asks what he would like to play. The protagonist says he doesn't know, that he's just fooling around and asks if there's something easy. The staff member tells him to follow. He leads him to two men playing and tells him to place his bets. The staff member hands him two chips, saying they're on the house and maybe he'll get lucky. Rain tosses them onto the table. The two men smile and call out, 4616, it's high. The staff member says it's a shame, he almost won. The young master asks if that's it, saying this is no fun at all and that he's hungry. The staff member tells him to wait, saying he can only leave after paying what he owes. The protagonist asks since when he owes them anything. The staff member says he loaned him those two chips, and he needs to pay for them before leaving. Rain points out that he just said they were on the house. The staff member says he was joking and nothing there is free. Each chip is worth 100 gold coins, but including service fees and interest, he owes 250 gold coins. And if he didn't bring enough money today, he can leave his maid as payment. A voice cuts in, telling him to stop talking nonsense because he's a cheater. It's Lillian, telling them not to believe him, and that each chip is worth only 1 silver coin. He's blatantly lying. The staff member gets angry, wanting to know where this wretch came from, how she dares ruin his plans and orders someone to beat her up. Without thinking twice, the young master punches him, sending him flying into some tables and knocking everything over. The protagonist asks who gave him permission to speak. The gamblers mutter that everything's his, while another tells the others to get out of the way and leave some for themselves. Rain thinks these people are hopeless. Someone approaches, asking who dares cause trouble in his casino. It's the rider from earlier. The young master thinks the big fish has arrived. The people in the casino look frightened. The warrior orders his guards to beat them and make them learn their place. The people beg him to stop, saying they've learned their lesson and to spare them, but the guards hit them anyway. The others in the place watch in fear. The rider says everyone should behave or this will be their fate. Lillian blames herself, thinking that if she hadn't brought them to a place like this, they wouldn't have been deceived. She remembers when they went to the hospital and the young master told the doctor to save her mother, saying he would pay. She thinks she has to return the favor to her big brother. Aylor steps forward, saying she won't allow them to deceive big brother. People wonder who this child is, thinking it's the end for her. No one in Iceling who angered Vercelo ever met a good end. The writer asks if she has something to say. Lillian says his casino has cheated everyone and destroyed countless families, and she won't let him intimidate her big brother. They're good people. Vercelo moves in to attack, and Aylor thinks she's about to be beaten. She slowly opens her eyes, realizing the protagonist has grabbed his hand, stopping the blow from landing. He notes his stats and realizes that not only are his attributes bad, but his loyalty is only 5. This Eldrin family could start a revolt at any moment, and he needs to be careful. The knight asks if he also seems to dislike his attitude. Rain replies that no, in fact, he likes his way of acting. Only the strong can survive in this world, and whoever wins the fight takes everything. Vercelo laughs and asks if he still intends to oppose him, and if he knows who he is. The young master replies that he doesn't need to know who he is, only one thing. The protagonist claps his hands and his guards enter. He says that since he has now won the fight, he will take whatever he wants, and his words are the law. Elsewhere, a voice says he hopes Ryan will like his daughter, and another calls him Lucas, saying he heard he made a lot of money recently. Lucas replies that it's all thanks to the city lord. A man wonders if he intends to take advantage of the Grand Duke with his daughter, recalling when he told a subordinate to give him a little scare during tonight's banquet, thinking he's naive. In real time, a girl approaches and offers him a toast. The man thanks her and wonders where Vercelo went, since if he were here, they could build a better relationship with the Grand Duke's son and give him some leeway. They can't rely too much on this worthless city lord. Someone says, "Your Highness, Ryan has arrived." He enters, and the head of the Raven family says he bought him some gifts, while the head of the Router family says he brought his daughter and asked him to take a look. The young master says that if everyone is ready, they will begin. The subordinates approach with a poster, placing it on the floor. They look at the image and wonder what it is, asking if it looks like a house. The protagonist says that this is the design for a dam he drew this afternoon, and they will make sure it is feasible during construction. The family heads wonder about baggage and whether it's for catching fish. Rain tells them not to worry, as he will explain now, and asks his maid for the map. He continues, saying that he took a look this afternoon at the geographical location of the city of Iceling. There is a major flood every year due to the river north of the city. If they build a dam there, they can stop the floods during the rainy season and irrigate the crops during droughts. His Highness thinks it's a great idea. If they can really build that dam, Iceling's agricultural production will improve greatly. It seems the Grand Duke's son is no simple man. The head of the Raven family asks what that has to do with them. The young master says he needs money. Every construction requires money. A man says they are poor too, and the Raven head agrees. The man thinks that although he's smart, he's also very naive. Does he expect these leeches to finance him? That won't work. The protagonist says not to tell him they're poor. He has a good way to make money and will share it now. He raided a casino this afternoon and won about 50,000 gold coins. and asks how many other casinos there are in Iceling and if anyone knows. The family heads wonder if he raided a casino. That means they won't be getting a share this month. They ask which casino it was and hope it wasn't one they invested in. And all the casinos in Iceling are managed by Master Adrian. This young man is going to cause trouble. The man calls him an idiot in his thoughts. If he had just stayed quiet, he probably wouldn't have done anything to him, but since he picked a fight, he'll destroy him. He says that raiding a casino breaks the laws of the Caradorial nation, and the nation's laws must not be broken. People agree, saying it's not right, that Adrian is correct, and those casinos are legal businesses. You can't just rob them because you want to. They ask how he could do such a thing. The man thinks he's very naive and doesn't know how to control people. Rain says that they pretend to be poor when asked for donations and refuse to make up for it, and he knows all about their involvement with the casinos. He'll give them one last chance. Either they give them up now or he'll take them himself. Adrian says that if the Grand Duke learns about his behavior here, he won't forgive him easily. Those around agree, telling him not to play with this and to know his place. The young master says that if he wants to talk about the law, great, then arrest them all and they'll discuss the law today. The casino guards are tied up. The man wonders why these two are here. Weren't they always on Versilo's side? Unless. The protagonist asks if he knows these two. Adrian says he's never seen them before and asks what this means. Rain sits down and tells him not to be alarmed. It's no big deal, they just tried to eliminate him this afternoon. Thinking back, they had said that in the city of Iceling, the powers could darken the sky with just one hand, and that they had someone in Iceling supporting them. The master tells them to untie the two and see if they remember anyone from the group. People watch and wonder if these two aren't Versilo's followers, and Rain has just said they tried to eliminate him. It seems the master's luck has run out. Adrian thinks that if these two say anything, his entire family will be ruined. He grabs a knife, demanding to know how they dared attack the Grand Duke's son, calling them trash and telling them to pay with their lives. The two are struck down, people look on in shock, and with the two defeated, the master feels relieved. He says he was overcome by anger and acted impulsively after hearing about the assassination attempt and tells Ryan to punish him however he sees fit. The young master puts a hand on his shoulder and says that with such a strong sense of justice, Adrian truly is a great noble. Adrian replies that he only did what he should have. The protagonist says to bring in the real culprit, and he'll see if there are more outstanding nobles like him in the group. They bring in Versilo tied up, telling him to take his hands off them and calling him trash, saying his father is the greatest noble in all of Iceling, and when he's freed, he'll tell his father to defeat them all. The Lord notices he's been captured and realizes that's why he couldn't find him. Aloran demands to know how he dares eliminate his servants, saying he's completely done for. He calls him trash and says that once he's free, he'll capture and torture him, making him beg for death. Rain asks if that means he not only wants to eliminate him, but also torture him. Versilo answers exactly, saying that no one in Iceling can oppose him, and that Rhine is finished. The young master says that's splendid. This is the first time he's met someone so bold, and asks Adrian if he doesn't agree. Aloran realizes he's his father and laughs, calling him a piece of shit and saying his days are numbered, asking if he doesn't know who he is. His father cuts him off, ordering him to shut up, calling him an ungrateful child and telling him to kneel now. Versilo asks what's going on. The Lord shoves his son to the ground and says he's a naive youth, begging Rain for forgiveness and saying he's willing to give anything. Aloran remembers his father telling him that the Grand Duke's son would arrive the next day to take over the territory and to make sure to get close to him, and asks if Rain is the Grand Duke's son. The protagonist asks what other reason there would be for him to have so many soldiers. Versilo bows his head to the floor, begging for forgiveness, admitting he made a terrible mistake and won't do it again. Adrian says to give his family a chance to redeem themselves, and he kneels too, saying their family swears on their lives. Rain says to give up everything they have gained illegally over the years and he'll guarantee their safety. The Lord thanks him, thinking he's safe now, and that regarding this man he needs to warn the master about him. He says he has something to report. The city lord Eldrick has contacted foreign forces in an attempt to betray the Grand Duke. A young man wonders if the city lord wants a rebellion. Someone calls him a bastard. It's the young master, saying he was going to let him go, but he's still here slandering the Lord and questioning his loyalty, so they can execute these fools for speaking nonsense immediately. The man widens his eyes, thinking that, just as the master said, this youth isn't only stupid but also impulsive. He says his insight and attitude are greatly appreciated, and that he is completely loyal to him and the Grand Duke, never even considering rebellion. The protagonist says not to worry, as he's sure he would never betray him. Rain checks his stats. Elsewhere, the young master is observing something, thinking that these nobles hand over more than 100,000 gold coins, about 2 years' worth of taxes that Iceling collects. Leah approaches with his full tea service. The protagonist asks if she knows exactly how rich these nobles are. The maid asks what he plans to do about what Adrian said, pointing out that if the city lord is really planning a rebellion, he'll be in danger. Rain tells her to calm down, saying he understands her concern, but there's no need to rush. He's certain Eldrick is planning a rebellion, but he can't just reveal his plans right now. Leah asks why. The young master replies that it's because he still doesn't know who's working for Eldrick and Iceling, and he's still exposed while his enemies are in the shadows. If he acts rashly, everything will turn into chaos. It's better for Eldrick to think he's just a naive and ignorant rich boy before he investigates thoroughly. Elsewhere, a mage says it's absurd and nonsense, but Eldrick tells Guildmaster Malcolm to calm down, as Master Rein is young and eager to prove himself as a Grand Duke. The old man says that the city doesn't need to take his side. Even the Grand Duke has to show respect to them, the mages, when they speak. Calgar thinks to himself that he had been wondering how he would bribe the Mage Guild. He looks at the Water Conservation Project, the recruitment notice, and thinks that Rain brought this to him. Guildmaster Malcolm says that Rein is insolent and that he's going to have a word with him, but Eldrick tells him to wait, thinking that Rein has offended the Mage Guild and from now on, he'll be on his own in Iceling. Later elsewhere, the protagonist thinks that he's back to the days of drawing engineering designs and nothing else. The maid enters and says that Guildmaster Malcolm would like to see him. Rain wonders who that is. The mage asks what this means and why he is insulting the Mage Guild like this. The young master asks what he's talking about, and when he supposedly insulted the guild, the guildmaster shows him a sheet saying the project does not accept applications from individuals who are mages, physically weak or elderly, and tells him to stop acting like he doesn't know. He's the one who made this recruitment notice. The protagonist replies yes, saying he's building a dam, and asks how that's an insult to their guild. The mage says that the recruitment notice clearly states he is refusing applications from mages, and there's no way that isn't a provocation to the Mage Guild. Rain wonders if the world here is so ruthless that even mages take jobs that require physical strength. The guildmaster says that if Rain doesn't give him a reasonable explanation, all the mages in the guild will refuse to work for him from now on. The young master asks the system to show his stats and sees that his loyalty isn't low, so it seems someone may have provoked him. He says it's a misunderstanding, that he didn't mean to disrespect the Mage Guild, and that there are 3 reasons for not hiring mages this time. First, their mana capacity per day is limited, so they might not meet the deadline. Second, it's simply much more expensive to hire mages. With the same amount of money, he could hire 10 physical laborers instead. Third, most mages live comfortably as part of a guild. Malcolm says that civilians, however, don't have a safety net, and as the city's lord, Rein should give them special consideration. And, with all due respect, magic is the law in this world. The protagonist says that those without magical talent deserve to be beneath mages, and that's correct, but he doesn't like it. The mage says that starting in Iceling, he intends to make everyone understand that mages are no different from civilians, neither superior nor inferior, and suggests Rain change his stance if he doesn't want to make enemies. Leah approaches with her dagger drawn, and Rain tells him to be careful with his tone. Otherwise, his maid will invoke the law of insulting nobility by cutting his throat. Grimlock says that's absurd, but the young master says it's not absurd. This law really exists. And if he doesn't believe him, he'll have his maid cut his throat and watch the court rule in his favor. He asks, "How about that?" Malcolm apologizes, asking him to spare his life. The protagonist thinks that even in a situation like this, his loyalty hasn't dropped. He really doesn't realize he's being used, and he's naive. Rain tells his maid to let him go, and the mage thanks him. The system notifies him. Beginner mission to use the investigation skill on 10/10 people completed. Beginner reward package for the host is now available. New mission unlocked. Obtain 5 high-level characters. New functions available. Rain thinks that he's finally completed the system mission and will now see what reward he's earned. Elsewhere, Eldrick asks if everything went well. The mage tells him not to say another word. The young man not only didn't listen, but even kicked him out. Calgar says he has an idea. Not only will he change the young man's mind, but he'll also make him more respectful toward him. And when those peasants refuse to work for the master, he'll have no choice but to ask for his help. Malcolm asks why those people wouldn't work for the master when he's offering good conditions. Eldrick replies that the young man will be disappointed in those peasants if they all turn out to be lazy. The mage says no way. He'll just be disappointed in him for refusing to hire mages, and asks why Eldrick would try to sabotage him with that. Calgar tells him not to worry, saying those peasants are useless anyway, and asks why they'd be starving. They don't know how to farm or hunt, and why such useless people would take the idea of helping the master build the dam seriously. Malcolm says they might as well try his idea. Then, voices ask what the talk is about, saying they heard that the new lord is hiring people to build something, and they also heard it's an unmissable offer. 3 meals a day will be provided, and the pay will be 10 copper coins. 2 young men ask if the new lord is really that kind, and if they'll accept the job, but one says it must be a trap, asking if these nobles haven't already deceived them many times. He says he definitely won't do it, or he'll probably be killed without even knowing it. Then someone approaches, telling them not to dare slander His Majesty. It's Lillian, saying His Majesty told her personally that he's going to try to make everyone's life better. People start laughing and ask what a little girl like her could know. They all burst out laughing and ask if she likes that pretty boy. Alora says that she and her father want to join the dam project. The subordinate taking note says her father will be accepted, but not her. Lillian is confused and asks why not, since she's pretty strong too. The subordinate says she's not even of legal age, and the master said minors under 18 can't be hired. If they take her behind his back and he finds out, he will certainly punish them. He says her father can work on building the dam. It's 8 hours a day with 3 meals provided, 10 copper coins paid at the end of each day. And if they have no more questions, they need to sign with their fingerprint there and present it at the construction site the next day. Ilora tells her father he must work hard without slacking off. He replies not to worry, he won't gamble anymore and won't disappoint the young master. She must stay home and take care of her mother since she can no longer work outside because of her illness. The subordinate tells them to wait and come back, so the two stop. The soldier asks if he said his wife is sick. The man replies that his wife is very ill and really can't work. The subordinate asks who said she needs to work. He says the young master declared that family members of any worker on the dam project must be temporarily relocated to the workers' accommodations, which can be considered a temporary residence while they work on the dam, and once construction is complete, they can return home. The man kneels on the ground and thanks him profusely. The soldier tells him to stand up and says he'll send someone to take him and his daughter to the housing, and they can choose where they'd like to live. Excited people tell them to wait, asking if the new lord is telling the truth, and saying they need to register immediately. They can't miss this chance. The soldier tells everyone to form a line, stand in a straight row, and not push. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the protagonist is looking at the system message congratulating him for receiving a lithium iron phosphate battery project and 100 beginner host reward packs. Rain thinks about the battery project and wonders what the hell he's supposed to do with it without an electric generator. Do they expect him to carry the batteries and get struck by lightning to charge them? More notifications arrive telling him to train and obtain 5 high-stat characters. The young master wonders where in the world he'll find 5 high-stat characters, thinking he might train his maid. But after looking at her stats, he sees she can't grow any further. He figures he'll have to go into the city to look for talent again. Then a voice says, Lillian is here to see him. He tells them to let her in. The girl enters and says something strange is happening at the construction site. Everyone is slacking off. The protagonist asks about slacking off. Elsewhere, Alore asks why her father took another break. He says he promises he's not slacking, but he's felt tired since waking up this morning, and no one else there has any energy either. Lillian calls for everyone's attention, saying they received an amazing offer from His Majesty, and asks why they're slacking off. A man yawns, saying they're trying, but they've been feeling like this since the morning, and maybe it's been so long since they last worked that they've all come down with the instant work exhaustion disease, and will probably feel better if they rest for a day. There's always tomorrow. Alora tells them to stop with this nonsense, saying they're all probably just lazy, that there's no way such a disease exists, and that they should listen to the master, telling him to tell them to work hard and stop slacking. Rain walks over to her father, checks his stats, and notices an anomaly, curse. He says they're not sick, they're cursed. Everyone falls silent. The young master looks at the system's explore function, thinking he had planned to use it when the dam's construction began, but it seems he will test it now. The system shows that through explore, the host can analyze the condition of rocks, strata, formations, minerals, hydrology, and terrain features in a specific area. The protagonist asks the system to analyze the geological condition of this area, and the system begins analyzing within a radius of 10 kilometers, telling him to wait. Rain thinks there's no oil or metals down there, a shame, until he notices something and wonders what it is. He asks if they can dig deeper there, as he suspects something is buried. Rock replies that, of course, it's nothing, even if they are tired. Later, still in the same place, after digging, they come across something shining. Leah wonders if the young master is truly a genius in magic, thinking the magic from it is so faint that even she couldn't sense it, and becomes curious about how he did it. The protagonist tells them to unearth this crystal and put it in the box. He then asks what people normally do when cursed. The maid replies that they can go to a church and ask a priest to remove it, or they can seek a high-level mage from the Mage Guild. Rain asks if she said Mage Guild. He then tells Lillian to follow him and bring her father, as they're going to find a priest. She asks if her father is really cursed. The young master replies yes, and that whoever did it won't get away with it. Later, at the church, the nun welcomes them. The protagonist thinks that since he's asking her to treat someone, he should first make sure she has good loyalty. The system investigates and shows her stats. Rain is surprised, wondering about her being an elf. She's not even human. The nun says she is Saint Ayuria of the church. and asks what she can do for him. The young master says that the man there seems to be cursed and asks if she can do anything about it. Thinking her loyalty seems good and deciding to let her take a look first, the saint asks to inspect him. She opens her eyes, releasing a bright light, and says, "He's right. The man is indeed cursed." The protagonist asks if she can remove it. Iuria releases energy, making a magic circle approach and enter his body. Rock, excited, says he feels like a new man, that he's going back to work right now and will do all the work he should have done today and more. Rain tells him there's no rush. It won't be too late to start after they deal with this first, and says they found this at the construction site, asking if she knows what it is. They open the box, revealing the crystal inside. The saint says that black crystal is the most common type of magic crystal. An enormous amount of magic was stored to make the curse effective. However, it seems more like a prank than a true curse. The caster could have killed someone with the same amount of magic, but instead only made people tired. The young master asks if it's very easy to make such a crystal. Iuria says it's very easy for a high-level mage to make one and hide it daily at the young master's construction site. The protagonist asks if she knows about his project. The saint replies that the project will greatly benefit the civilians here, and why wouldn't she know? Thanks to the project helping so many people, the pressure on the church has also eased. Rain thinks it looks like he's going to have to teach that old man a lesson. He asks if there's a way to remove the curse from the entire construction site. Iuria replies that it will be a bit difficult. He was lucky to find the crystal today, but might not be so lucky next time. Plus, if everyone focuses on digging up crystals, who will focus on the actual construction? The young master thinks it seems he will still have to confront Malcolm about this. The saint says she knows someone who could solve his problem, but she's a bit eccentric and asks if he'd like to try anyway. Elsewhere, the protagonist approaches with his card, thinking this is the house of Lady Selena, the former president of the Mage Guild. He knocks on the door, thinking that one way or another, he'll persuade her to help. The maid notices something, pushes her master aside, and warns him to be careful. An explosion occurs. Rain wonders about this explosion and what's happening. A voice complains about another failure. Selena says she can't accept it and won't stop until she succeeds in creating it, even if she has to level the entire city of Iceling. She refuses, saying she's busy researching a new magic device and has no time for him. The young master asks about magic devices, like wands. Selena tells him not to insult her with such a low level of understanding. Leah, surrounded by a powerful aura, says Selena should mind her tone when speaking to the young master. Selena replies that Leah has great magic and suggests she stay there as her assistant. When she succeeds, she'll help her little master and asks what she thinks. The maid says that if Selena doesn't know how to be polite, maybe she should teach her. The two glare at each other. The protagonist tells her to calm down, as they're here to ask for help, not cause trouble. He asks if Selena made everything on this table and if she's creating a magic item. Selena answers that at least he recognizes all those failures. Unfortunately, she releases energy into her hand and says she's trying to create a device that can store powerful electrical magic within itself. Rain wonders about storing electrical magic and asks if it's a magic device for storing electricity. The mage replies yes, and that when it works, an explosion like the earlier one happens, and that he can go now since she needs to rest before resuming her research. The young master stares at her and asks if, hypothetically, he told her there's a way to create a device that can store electricity. Would she help him deal with the Mage Guild? Selena says she already told him. She has no time for nonsense. The protagonist insists he's serious, asking if helping her create a device that stores electricity would earn her help in resolving the problem with the Mage Guild. The mage agrees, saying that if he can create the magical device she needs, she'll not only deal with that idiot Malcolm, but make the entire Mage Guild listen to him. But if he fails, she won't be responsible for his safety. Later, elsewhere, Rain is looking over the lithium iron phosphate battery schematics, thinking he was trying to figure out where in the world he could get electricity, and supposing that these mages could serve as human power generators before the hydro generators are built. He says it was built exactly like she built hers. Selena warns him again. There's no way. Those stones store magic and would explode if even a bit of magic were used. The young master tells her not to worry, saying this battery has a capacity of 185 Wh and tells her to show how much she can charge it by releasing electricity. The mage says she'll see if it's truly as powerful as he claims. She touches the battery, releasing her energy, and is surprised, asking if it didn't explode. The protagonist says that's all, and it's not even half of what the battery can take. Selena calls him a brat, saying she'll wipe that smirk off his face. He knows nothing about magic. Later, in the same place, the mage is exhausted from pouring so much magic into the battery without it exploding, wondering if this thing really can store her magic. Rain crouches next to the battery, thinking that's enough to power an electric vehicle for over 3,000 kilometers, and she managed to charge it to 87% on her own. Now he truly has a portable human battery, his beloved portable Mage Guild battery. It's time to show his talents. The mage asks if he can use electrical magic too. The young master says not only can he use electrical magic, but he can also make anyone in the city of Iceling able to use it. Selena calls that nonsense, asking how magic could be learned so easily. The protagonist says he has a magic device even more powerful than this battery, and if she's willing to help him, he'll show her a world where anyone can use magic, and asks what she thinks. The mage repeats his words about a world where anyone can use magic. Elsewhere, Malcolm sits thinking it must be about time for the young man to beg for help. Selena approaches and says it's been a while. The mage asks why she's there. The sorcerer says he's got some nerve, asking if he's daring to stand against the young master of the ducal family, whether he's trying to rebel or something. Malcolm asks what she's talking about, saying he'd never dare think of something so dangerous. Selena grabs his shirt and demands he spill it, asking what dirty tricks he pulled at the young master's construction site, warning him she's short-tempered. The mage says he'll talk and begs for his life. He gathered all the mages from the association and told them the Lord disrespected them, making them furious. Then he had them create crystals that could cast curses and used teleportation magic to place them under the Lord's construction site. This made the common workers exhausted, hoping the young master would think they were lazy and useless. Eventually, the Lord would apologize to him and agree to work closely with the Mage Association from then on. That's all, and he swears he had no other intentions. The mage calls him an idiot and asks if he didn't even realize he was being used. Malcolm asks who used him. Selena says that's enough and tells him to go call those troublemaking mages immediately. The mage replies that he understands and runs off. The sorceress takes out a card and summons the protagonist, telling him she has dealt with the Mage Association's problems for him. Rain thanks her. Selena asks if he needs her to deal with Eldrick, saying she can make him disappear without leaving a trace. The young master replies that's not necessary, as Eldrick is not a threat. In fact, he needs his help to lure in an even bigger fish. The mage says that since everything is settled, she'll withdraw, and asks when they can start working on the new projects he mentioned, telling him to call her when ready. The protagonist says they can have the Mage Association members charge the batteries. Elsewhere, Eldrick says it seems that Brat has taken control of the Mage Association, and asks what they'll do now. The hooded man replies there's no need to rush, as there's little more to worry about with the Mage Association in Aetherland City, and to forget those little mages. The real concern is that mysterious dam project. If dam works, as the young man claims, it could revitalize the people of Aetherland, and they can't allow that to happen. Calgar tells him not to worry about dam, as he has already set a trap for the youth and has been secretly pressuring the grain supply nobles to raise prices according to his wishes. The hooded man asks if he's sure those nobles will help. Eldrick replies that the young man made them spend money at the banquet, but he can make them take it all back. They may betray him, but they will never betray their own money. He flips a coin and says that boy doesn't have enough money to keep the dam project going until it's finished. Elsewhere, a big man kicks a girl, saying that if she can't pay, she has to leave. Lillian on the ground asks how they can set such high prices, saying that yesterday 2 sacks of grain cost 1 gold, and how can 1 sack now cost 2 gold coins overnight? The big man tells her to stop complaining, it's his grain, he sells it for whatever price he wants, and if she can't pay, she should leave. Elor remembers when she told the young lord to leave grain purchasing to her, as she could get the lowest price to save money, and he replied he would leave it to her. Lillian says they're greedy bandits, and asks if they aren't afraid of how the lord might deal with them. The big man says they are honest merchants, and asks what he could do. This is a golden opportunity, and they're just taking advantage of it. The merchant kicks her again, saying if she's out of money, then she needs to get out. At the church, the saint says those humans are becoming more outrageous, thinking that in just 3 days the price of grain has tripled. She tells Ilaria that if the grain is not enough for the people to survive the winter, she should take the supplies inside first, and she'll figure out the rest, telling her to take that money and, when leaving, to collect the usual amount. Ilaria asks if that isn't too much money, saying it normally costs 1/3 of that. Iuria tells her to do as she's told. Suddenly, someone moves quickly, creating a strong wind. It's the maid. The protagonist approaches with a bag of money, asking if she would like to make a deal. The saint asks what kind of matter he wants to discuss. Rain says she doesn't need to be so tense when it comes to business, calling her an elf. Iuria asks what he's talking about, saying that's human money. There's no way there are elves here. The young master says she doesn't need to be on guard. He knows they're elves and won't be hostile toward them. The saint asks what kind of business he wants with them. The protagonist says it's about food supplies. The saint apologizes for her bluntness, but says that might be beyond his ability. Rain asks why she says that. She explains that food in the city of Iceling is controlled by the 4 largest noble families, who have held power there for over a century, firmly controlling grain prices in the cities. At the banquet a few days ago, they may have intimidated some people with their iron fist tactics, but those were just small fry in Iceland. The young master asks if she knows Iceland that well. The elf says she has lived there for 120 years, so she knows it well. If at that banquet the young master had not acted against the Elven family, there might still have been room for negotiations. But now, she fears that due to war and natural disasters, food was already scarce this year. If the price of grain had remained stable, her people would barely have survived the winter. But now, the protagonist promises her that in less than a month, grain prices in Iceling will be cheaper than before. Elsewhere, August laughs, saying it's all thanks to the Lord's support. Klein says that the 4 great Andy families have made an absolute fortune this time. Someone at the table says they should thank the Lord for bringing them into this business. The 2 at the table give their thanks. August says to toast to the prosperity of their business. A subordinate approaches, saying that the young man has sent an invitation requesting his presence at the banquet along with the other 3 lords. The man, startled, asks about a banquet with the young man, wonders if he thinks he's planning to come after them, and asks what they should do, since they only want to profit and not lose their lives. Klein says not to worry, the Lord has already assured them that the grain price increase is completely legal and compliant. As long as they don't provoke the young man, nothing will happen. He bangs on the table and continues, saying that, besides, if all 4 of them go together, there's nothing he can do to them. The grain price is set by them, the merchants. Even the emperor has no authority to interfere, much less the youngest son of a duke. The 3 at the table agree with him, saying he's right, and that if they take advantage of this opportunity, their families won't face poverty for the next 100 years. August says that today they sold a sack of grain for 2 gold coins. If the young man pushes them too much, they'll sell it for 5 copper coins to appease him. If anyone dares to back down, he won't forgive them. They tell him to rest assured, as they'll stand by him until the end and work with him. Klein says that's great, and now they should go change into something more appropriate to attend the young man's banquet. The man asks if they're really changing. Elsewhere, the maid calls for her master. The subordinate says that the lord and the others have arrived. The protagonist tells him to let them in and that he can tell the kitchen to start serving the food. The subordinate replies that he understands. People walk in, entering the room, and it's August and his group greeting them. Rain wonders if they're trying to pretend to be poor in front of him and thinks they still have much to learn, asking if they aren't the nobles who control Iceling's grain supply and why they look so shabby. Klein says they recently heard about his project, which gives great benefits to the people and that they'd also like to contribute. The man says that under their lord's guidance, they not only donated large sums of money to help the project, but also sold the grain from their warehouses at the lowest possible price. The maid thinks these shameless men are trying to deceive her master. The young master says he's touched by their understanding and help in his efforts, and thanks them for their assistance, saying he invited them all to discuss matters related to grain. August says they understand he's been short on money recently, but 2 gold coins per sack is already a loss for them. His group agrees. The protagonist says they misunderstood. What he meant is that starting tomorrow, he's asking if they can raise the price of grain in Iceling to 4 gold coins per sack. They're shocked, and August asks about raising it to 4 gold coins per sack. Rain replies exactly, and that he himself will take a 30% commission, asking what they think. Klein says he's a bit old and his hearing isn't what it used to be, asking if he really just said to raise the grain price to 4 gold coins per sack. The young master says not to forget that he'll take a 30% commission from this deal. August thinks that he believed the young man was just an inexperienced kid, but it seems he's as cunning as they are merchants. And with him being so understanding, this path will be much smoother for them. And if he had known he was reasonable, he would have visited much earlier. But without an official decree, they can't raise the price, because if a rebellion breaks out, they'll only suffer. So he thanks him for understanding and asks when he plans to make this announcement. The protagonist says the documents are already written with the family seal. After they finish the meal, they'll settle it, and he'll make it clear that if anyone dares to disobey starting tomorrow, the fate of the Elderwind family should serve as a warning, and asks if they agree. The group says not to worry, they won't waste his kindness. At dusk, elsewhere, the man asks if they shouldn't inform the city's lord about this, saying that raising the grain price beyond the current increase is already unusual. August throws something at him and calls him an idiot, asking if he's gone mad, saying that the more people know about this, the less profit the 4 of them will make. That brat can't have that much power, and he thinks he's only using them for his own benefit. He says the grain price issue will stay between them. An unimaginable fortune is right in front of them, and anyone who doesn't take advantage of this opportunity is a fool who deserves misery. The man says he's never seen such a good opportunity in his life and feels foolish for worrying too much. So from now on, he'll follow his lead, united until the end. Klein laughs and says that's great. From now on, they'll stick together and he'll act quickly before the announcement is made to collect all the grain from those small merchants outside. This time, they'll profit more than ever. Elsewhere, a voice calls him a traitor and asks if he didn't promise to lower the grain price. It's the Saint, asking why he's conspiring with those idiotic merchants, and says that today she'll show him that elves are no joke. Lillian tells her not to act like that because he promised the price would drop. Ioria says he's conspiring with the merchants and asks how the price will ever go down. Ilora says to trust him and believes he has a plan. The saint looks down and asks if he's really going to raise the grain price. The protagonist says she doesn't need to worry about that. The price won't stay high for long. In less than a month, the grain market will completely collapse. Ioria says that's typical of an inexperienced youth and he has no idea how cruel the world can be. She's lived almost 200 years and has never seen grain prices go down after rising that much. Rain says he'll ask her something. If she had pointed a knife at their throats, for now she thinks the price would drop by a single copper coin, maybe 10. The saint replies that even so, he can't raise the price to 4 gold coins per sack. When it was 2 coins, some families could still buy and barely survive. If it goes up to 4 gold coins, they won't be able to pay and will be wiped out by starvation. The young master says that at 2 gold coins, they'd starve to death. At 4 gold coins, they'd still starve to death. So, for the peasants of Iceling, there's no difference between 2 and 4 gold coins. Either way, they'll die of hunger. One just takes longer than the other. Ioria stares at him. The protagonist says that what he aims for isn't to make the merchants lower just a few copper coins. That would be insignificant. He's going to make those merchants lose everything. Houses, families, everything. 7 days later, a voice is saying that during charging, some lithium ions detach from the lithium iron phosphate, and it's Rain, who also says they travel through the electrolyte to the negative electrode and embed themselves in the carbon material present there. At the same time, electrons are released from the positive electrode and travel through an external circuit to the negative electrode, maintaining the balance of the chemical reaction. During discharge, the lithium ions leave the negative electrode, travel through the electrolyte, and reach the positive electrode. Simultaneously, electrons are released from the negative electrode and reach the positive electrode through the external circuit, supplying energy to the outside. Selena says, so that's how it works. Such a complex magical system. The young master says, that's today's lesson. The maid says the young lady is here again. The protagonist asks if she has nothing better to do. The mage says, it's still about the grain price increase. The price per sack in the city is approaching 7 gold coins. The saint asks if he didn't say the prices would go down and says that now, throughout Iceling, even the minor nobles are struggling to buy grain, let alone the peasants, and asks if he knows the current grain price. Rain asks since when prices started rising. The maid replies 7 days ago. The young master says that in that case, it's time to put those merchants in their place. Ioria tells him to stop with the cryptic remarks and to explain everything to her right now, or else her Elven clan will absolutely cut all ties with him. The protagonist says the reason he didn't tell her earlier was to make sure the performance didn't look fake and arouse the noble's suspicions. Now he'll finally reveal the truth to her. The news is that grain is at least 4 gold coins per sack, and he asks what she thinks is the thing most lacking in Iceling right now. The saint says he's not saying anything, and Rain says it's a merchant selling grain. Iryu widens her eyes and looks a bit confused. The young master asks if she finally understands and says, that's right. In this city of Iceling, the one thing not lacking is food and merchants selling it. Ambition is the easiest human trait to control. No one can resist their desires. The price in Iceling rose to 4 gold coins per sack. This news reached merchants from neighboring cities, and they immediately showed up with ambitious eyes, bringing grain and rushing to Iceling. Merchants from other cities brought huge quantities of grain to the city, certain that they would be bought at high prices by those 4 fools, further feeding the merchants' greed. Now, the city of Iceling is the city with the greatest grain empire. All merchants lose their senses when faced with a 10,000% profit, keeping only 2 words in mind: get rich. The protagonist says that after today, the 4 noble families of Iceling will be nothing, and tells his maid to spread the news throughout the city that the Holy Maiden is selling the church's reserve grain because she disapproves of the Lord's methods. The price will be 1 gold coin per sack, and she should make sure everyone knows. Ioria tells him to wait and asks why he's giving her such a reputation. Rain replies that it's because she doesn't have any grain and asks how she's going to sell it. The saint says she also doesn't have that much grain and asks if he wants her to sell all the grain her people need for winter, saying she absolutely cannot do that as those are the grains her Elven tribe needs to survive the winter. Selena says she's being too naive and that if it were her, she'd listen to the young man and sell the grain immediately. Every second lost means money lost. Ioria says that they elves have no interest in money. They only need the grain. The young master tells her to do as he said, and that her grain will only increase, to trust him, and he counts on the mage and the mage association to seal the city. Selena says not to worry, she won't let a single rat escape from Iceling. The protagonist says it's time to make those greedy merchants pay. Elsewhere, Ryan is reviewing some papers and notices something, asking his maid if there's a problem. She replies that she fears the plan might fail and asks what happens if the merchants hold out for a few days, until all the saints' grain has been sold. The young master says there are two types of schemes. One is secret and the other is an open plan. And while you can avoid a secret plan, you can't escape an open one. Those merchants from other cities came blinded by greed, risking everything. They'll fight to get rich overnight. But now, if they learn prices are going to fall, they'll panic and sell everything because being slow means elimination. Elsewhere, a voice says something terrible has happened. The church announced they will start selling their grain reserves to help the people, only 1 gold coin per sack. The man asks what they should do. The merchants say they're screwed. They bought their grain at 2 or 3 gold coins per sack. One of them says not to panic and asks how much grain a church can have, enough for just a few days in Iceland. Klein says to send some people to the church to buy as much as they can. At the church, several people are saying they want 5 sacks of grain. The saint tells them not to push, as there's enough grain for everyone. The Pope sent 10,000 sacks because people were struggling. People say they don't believe it and to hurry and buy everything before it's gone. Ayuria says not to push and to line up, but they tell her to move, as they want to buy. The protagonist steps forward, telling everyone to calm down. This is grain provided by the Pope, and it's only the first shipment. More will arrive in Iceland tomorrow. The saint says she understands and thinks he won't get her into trouble again, as she wouldn't be able to handle it, wondering what to say if the Pope finds out. Many people there say they have grain and are saved. They will have food. One merchant thinks it's over. His business is ruined. The church has ruined everything. He bought his stock for 60 silver coins. Transport costs about 10 silver coins, and adding recent expenses. That's 90 silver coins per sack of grain, but he can still make a profit of 10 silver coins, so he needs to sell immediately and can't wait any longer. He starts shouting that he's selling New Year's grain for 95 silver coins per sack. People start approaching him, wanting to buy. The other merchants watch and think he's a bastard playing dirty. And if one falls, they all fall, so they start selling for 88 silver coins per sack. Leah says her master is amazing, and it's happening exactly as he planned. Some merchants are selling for as low as 79 silver coins per sack. The protagonist says that's human nature. If you fall behind, you'll lose much more. Everyone is afraid of selling too late, so they're dropping prices like crazy. The maid says that this way, the price per sack will return to 50 silver coins, and then the water project can be completed on time. Rain asks about 50 silver, and says she's underestimating those merchants. When people like August start selling, grain will become the cheapest thing in Iceland. Leah asks if he thinks August and his people will really sell like the outsiders, saying they paid at least 2 gold coins or more to buy the sacks on the market. And besides, August and his people stood united at the banquet. They wouldn't betray each other. The young master asks about united, and says she's expecting too much from them. When it comes to profit, no one will want to be left behind. Prices in Iceland will no longer be a problem, and it's time to speak with the saint about the second part of the deal. Elsewhere, a subordinate approaches August and says that those merchants from outside the city are slashing their prices like crazy. Now a sack of grain is going for 75 silver coins. The man says that's impossible, it must be a joke, and asks if they didn't control all the grain trade in Iceland. Where is this grain from the outsiders coming from? The subordinate kneels on the ground and says it's true, and he wouldn't lie to him. Klein says foreign merchants, low prices. And now he understands. The young man is ruthless. Does he want to ruin the family completely? The sellers approach and ask what's going on. August thinks that the young man first spread news that the grain price in Iceland was sky high, which clearly attracted merchants from nearby cities to Iceland. Once the merchants flooded the city with grain, he used the church's name to lower prices, causing all the merchants who had just arrived to panic. In the end, those foreign merchants had to sell everything cheaply to avoid coming out worse. Roland says the young man used a very dirty trick. August says he has another plan that can help them turn the tables. They tell him to share it. Klein says this grain will only last in Iceland for a few months. If they hoard it until people are desperate, they can sell at sky-high prices. If they stick together and refuse to sell today, they will definitely see a return. But if any of them tries to sell, they're done for. Roland glares at him and says he's right, then says he's going home immediately to have all the grain stored, and thinks he doesn't care about that and will sell all the grain immediately, because they won't be able to hold out if they move slower than the others. The merchants watch him and wonder why he's trying to run off. If that's the case, it's every man for himself. They say they also need to go prepare. Later, still in the same place, the subordinate is kneeling, saying he'll send people to store the grain and not sell a single sack. August kicks him, calls him an idiot, and asks if he doesn't sell, does he think those 3 idiots won't sell theirs? The subordinate asks what to do then. Klein replies to sell all the grain immediately and not leave a single sack behind. Elsewhere, the protagonist asks what she thinks of this and if it's enough grain for her people to make it through winter. The saint looks and asks why it seems like the more grain they sell, the more they have. Rain answers that it's because she's selling at the peak and buying at the lowest point. This is the strategy that can help them profit thousands in gold. Lillian arrives, saying the grain price has dropped again, and now she can buy 3 sacks for 1 gold coin. The young master says he told her to wait a little longer, that it would drop even more, but she didn't believe him. And if she buys now, she'll be able to get 10 more sacks, then asks if they can talk about the deal now. The saint asks what kind of deal he wants to make with the Elven tribe. The protagonist answers, everything. Ayuria asks, everything? Rain replies that they can handle all the elves' needs, from small things like grain to big things like land. Anything the tribe needs, they can make a deal for it. The saint says that's too big a decision to make right away. She needs to speak with the queen. The young master says that's fine. She can arrange a meeting for the two of them. Anytime is fine, and asks her to deliver this letter to the queen. She leaves. The protagonist thinks that after the end of this grain crisis, the nobles of Iceling won't cause trouble for a while. The Mage's guild is already under his control, and it won't be long before the church is too. Now the city lord Eldrick only has the army and taxes as his remaining cards. If he can control the military power, no matter when Eldrick tries, he won't be able to escape him, and they need to find a way to infiltrate the military. The best way would be, the maid approaches him and calls him, saying he should rest more and let her help him relax. Rain says he's not tired, it's just until he hears someone calling the soldiers bastards, accusing them of abusing their authority by using the Grand Duke's name, and asking if they can't just pray for the gods to strike them with lightning. The saint replies that the gods are merciful. The man, still very agitated, says he can handle some losses in Iceling, but asks if on the way home he's going to be robbed by thieves, and how he's supposed to do business like that. And apparently the Grand Duke, too. The young master approaches him and asks if he's all right. The man asks who he is. The protagonist replies that he's someone who wants to do business with him. A cart moves forward and a soldier orders it to stop, asking who she is and what's in the back. Lillian replies that she's a citizen of Iceling, and the cart is full of goods she bought in the city, which she's taking to the Elven tribe to try to make some good deals. The soldier asks if she thinks she can just do business like that and tells them to check the cart. The soldiers go over and bang on the jars, cracking them. Ailora tells them not to do that, and now that the jars are all broken, asks how she's supposed to transport them. The soldier tells his superior there's nothing there and asks what to do. The chief says they'll charge a toll according to regulations, and tells her to pay the toll and she can go. Lillian asks if he broke her goods and now wants her to pay a toll. The chief says to pay or leave. Ailora gets irritated. Someone calls to her, telling her to pay them, and hands over a coin. The chief says the young man ordered him to increase the toll. Now it's 5 silver coins. Lillian gets angry, asking about 5 silver coins, saying all her goods are worth 3 and asking if he wants her to pay 5. The chief asks if she's going to pay or not, otherwise to get out of the way. Ailora, clearly furious, thinks about how they can use her older brother's name to deceive people and how he would never have ordered the toll to be raised. And when her plan is complete, she'll deal with all of them. The chief tells them to let her pass. The cart moves on. The protagonist says that this young man is impressive, raising the toll that much. The man tells him to watch his words, as the young man is the savior of Iceland, and not to dare insult him. Rain says he's a strange merchant, since the soldier clearly said it was the young man who ordered the toll increase, and asks if he still blames the soldiers instead of the young man. The man says he must be new around here, and that the young man has a brilliant plan to lower grain prices in Iceland to help the people. Even though he's lost money because of it, it's the first time he's seen the Lord care so much about the people. And if he ever has the chance to meet the young man, he'll serve him wholeheartedly. The young master says he heard that the son of the great Lord not only killed people at the banquet, but also forced citizens to dig up massive projects. The merchant says he must be talking about the Elven family and that they deserved it. The protagonist asks if he knows them. The merchant says he really must be a foreigner. Anyone doing business in Iceland knows the Elven family. Most people think the Eldwins made their fortune with casinos, but that's not true. Rain asks what he knows. The merchant looks around and says the Elven family's real business is human trafficking. The young master is surprised and asks what he just said, thinking that there aren't enough people as it is, and yet they dare mess with his workforce. They need to find a way to control the border guards. Otherwise, if there's internal chaos, it'll be hard to prevent other countries from taking advantage. Then he hears someone asking why they're charging a toll again. It's Lillian, saying they already paid the toll when they left Iceland. The soldier says Iceland's toll is Iceland's toll, and the border fort's toll is the border fort's toll. Ailora calls him a liar, saying they only had to pay 1 toll before. The soldier points his weapon at her and tells her to pay or leave. Lillian asks how much the toll is. The soldier smiles and says 1 gold coin. Ailora asks about 1 gold coin, calling it robbery. The people inside the carriage tell her to just pay it. The soldier asks if there are people inside and tells them all to get out. This is the border fort and all travelers must be inspected. The protagonist gets out and says that if he wants to inspect him, then go ahead. The soldier looks surprised and calls Trist a bastard, asking if he had the guts to come here. Rain asks if he's an acquaintance, and the merchant says yes. and these people were bandits from the nearby mountains. Later, he cooperated with the Elven family and was put in charge of human trafficking, after which the Elven family brought him here. The soldier says that the last time he left the city, he didn't pay enough in fees, and he got chewed out because of him. The soldier strikes him in the face and says that if he doesn't pay the money, he won't be leaving today. Trist puts his hand to his face and says, "This is madness," that he gave the amount he asked for last time. The soldier says that back then there was no shortage of money, but that doesn't mean there isn't now, and if it weren't for him, they would have let the cart pass for a few gold coins, but now that they've seen him, if he doesn't have 5 gold coins, he's not leaving. The protagonist says no, that those fees are far too high, and asks how the city of Iceling's revenue rate can be so low. The soldier asks where he's from until his eyes widen when he sees the maid, thinking there's such a beautiful girl in Iceland. The merchant asks if he wants 5 gold coins and says he'll give them now, and not to make things difficult for them. They're his business partners. The soldier says, as expected, and calls him an honest fellow, then says to take that with him. He extends his hand and asks the kitty where she lives. Rain grabs his arm and says that at first she wanted to see if they might be some kind of free labor force, but now it seems completely hopeless. The soldier says he's looking to lose his life. Plasma sprays as Leah slashes his throat without hesitation, her dagger dripping vital fluid as she stares at them coldly. His companions are terrified. The young master says to eliminate anyone who resists, then take over the escort and guard the area. The maid replies that she understands. The guards run off, shouting for someone to hurry because there's an eliminator here. They call for help. Leah immediately closes in and defeats them with a single strike, spraying plasma everywhere. The protagonist wonders if these people are really soldiers because the difference in numbers is so huge, and remembers his father saying that behind Iceland lies enemy territory, so he must be careful not to cause disputes between the two territories. Rain agrees, thinking that fortunately she discovered this major problem. Otherwise, there would have been an imperial dispute and she herself would have only lost. The maid wipes her plasma dagger and approaches the fallen soldiers with the intent to finish them, until someone approaches and asks who dares to cause trouble at Iceland's border. The soldiers brighten, saying that General Caesar is coming and they're saved, and that he can help them. The general asks if they're the ones causing this commotion. The young master looks at the system and thinks that this Caesar doesn't care about loyalty, but he's talented, and asks if he's Caesar from the Holker family with a brother who works in Prussia territory. The general asks who he is and how he knows his brother. The protagonist replies that it's because Prussia Edgar is his older sister. Caesar asks if he's the master, the youngest son of the Duke of Aldarian, and the startled soldiers ask if he's the son of the Grand Duke, saying they're screwed and have been insulting the wrong person. The general recalls his brother's letter which said the master would be coming to Iceland soon and must be protected at all costs. A month ago, Eldrick found him with a large sum of treasure and said that Iceland would need him in the future. Caesar thanked him for his generosity, and Eldrick said the Grand Duke sent him to this desolate place because he didn't take him seriously, and needless to say, the force deserved a higher status. In the present, the general stares at him and says he shouldn't waste his life in a place like this. And how dare he claim to be the master? Every soldier obeys orders. Caesar grips his sword and says to kill this false master, and he'll reward them all. The maid says he's bold, asking if he's planning to rebel. The soldiers tell him not to do this. It's a crime that will bring his family's destruction. The general asks if they've forgotten what he's done. They say he's blackmailed the son of the Grand Duke and broken the law. Caesar says they should know what the young man has done. The Elven family was destroyed by him, and the 4 lords were ruined as well. This is the far west of the Caradorial Empire, and it holds the wealth it has plundered over the years. If he takes the young man's head to the Orvis Empire in the north, he could live comfortably as a minor noble. Life or elimination, they can choose for themselves. He won't force them. The soldiers say they should listen to him. The maid thinks these soldiers have already been deceived by him. The soldiers say the general has a point and to follow him. Caesar asks if he has any last words before losing his life. The protagonist says that if they had straightened up, he would have given them a chance at a new life. It's a pity. The general orders them to follow his command, advance, and eliminate him. The maid says this skirt is getting in her way. She rips the skirt and moves quickly, rushing toward them, attacking and dodging blows. Leah exchanges strikes with the soldiers at high speed until she notices one approaching her master. She immediately attacks. The soldier collapses to the ground. The protagonist tells Caesar this is his last chance and not to be stubborn. The general refuses to change his mind and orders everyone to advance, saying whoever eliminates him will get 1,000 gold coins. The soldiers run as fast as they can, shouting that the reward is theirs, until a bald man is about to strike. He opens his mouth, but the maid kicks and strikes him, taking out everyone nearby. Caesar orders the mages to obey and take down the woman. They reply yes. One mage begins channeling magic, using ice arrow aimed at her. Leah blocks with her leg and growls when she sees her leg frozen, realizing she can't move. The general tells the troops to listen. This woman can't move anymore. so eliminate the young master now. The soldiers charge at him. Rain throws a hammer toward her and tells her to find a way to jump immediately. The maid grabs the hammer, smashes the ice off her legs, and escapes. The young master says it's just in time to test this little thing's power. He uses his battery, releasing energy to attack them, electrocuting everyone. The protagonist thinks that fortunately the ceramics worked. Other soldiers ask what's happening and if it's thunder magic. Rain says it would be great if they had a video recorder so they could film this scene as a workplace safety video. It would remind workers to be careful with electricity. The general asks why they stopped and orders them to keep advancing and eliminate him. The soldier next to him trembles, saying they can't. The young master must have used some kind of forbidden magic, and everyone who approaches him dies. Caesar kills him on the spot, saying anyone who rebels will be eliminated, and to advance immediately. He's just one man, he can't kill everyone. A soldier approaches, shaking all over, and asks what's going on. The maid asks why the soldiers weren't taken down by his magic. The protagonist replies he must have run out of energy and only brought one battery to test its full power. Leah says she'll get him out right away. Rain says not to worry, he's not getting away today. The general orders them to eliminate him immediately, saying his magic seems to have failed, until a massive magic spell is cast in the middle of the area, emitting a strong light. Caesar asks how this is possible and why the Mage Guild is here. Selena says he's a bold boy and asks if she arrived on time. The young master says perfectly, his battery just ran out of power. The mage asks if he used the battery and how the effects were. The protagonist replies that after they're captured, he'll explain in detail. Selena says understood, and orders all mages to obey, assist the young master, and destroy the rebels. The mages answer yes and cast intermediate lightning magic, lightning strike. A huge burst of power is unleashed. The soldiers scream for help and run, saying they were wrong and begging for mercy, that they don't want to fight anymore. The general mutters that even if he dies, he'll take the young master with him. He charges at him, leaping, sword aimed at him, using the sword technique, mountain crushing slash. The maid blocks with her dagger. Caesar thinks she got too close. Leah moves her leg and the general realizes this isn't good. Then he's hit with a kick and sent flying, causing a massive impact. Smoke disperses across the area. The maid, surrounded by a terrifying aura, stares him down. Later, elsewhere, Ryan is looking at a paper when he hears something and looks over to see Caesar tied up. He asks if he's awake and whether he and the border guards have been stealing for many years, and when he started working with Eldrick. The general looks surprised and asks how he knows. The young master says not to be surprised, he already knew Eldrick would betray them. He was just waiting for an opportunity, a chance to take him down in one move, and thanks to him, he can finally end this. Caesar asks what he thinks he can do against the Lord with so little evidence. The protagonist replies, no, he's mistaken. This doesn't represent a threat to him. All it tells him is the approximate annual tax revenue of the city from these records, and that will be a great reference for himself to transform the city in the future. The general asks about transforming the city of Iceland, and if he's dreaming, saying that to control the nobles in Iceland, they will never listen to him. Rain says she'll tell him something. Living people can be called nobles. Those eliminated cannot. Caesar asks about him, wondering if he intends to create a bloodbath among the nobles in the city. The young master replies that the nobles will have two choices. First, follow the same path to the end, elimination. Or second, follow obediently and do things for him in the future, and asks which he thinks they will choose. Later, elsewhere, the protagonist thinks that, judging by the time, autumn must be approaching and the Grand Duke will definitely send his troops this year. The city wall must be repaired quickly, otherwise it won't be able to stop the enemy in the event of war. He looks at the map and continues thinking that to the west is the elves' territory, belonging to the Saint and the others. As long as negotiations succeed, a war will not occur. There's no reason to worry about the Second Sister's territories to the east. The most problematic is the Grand Duke in the north. The maid says the money extorted by the border fort has been collected, about 350,000 gold. Rain says she will take the guards to handle the fort's defense first, give each person 100 gold coins, and put the rest in the carriage to take back to the city. He goes to the mage and thanks her for her help, and that of the Mage Guild, and for their hard work. Selena says it was easy and no problem, and asks if he can explain the principles of that battery discharge in detail, and how someone without magical abilities can use it. The young master says he will explain slowly on the way back. The mage says that's fine until the wizard approaches, calling her and saying it's not good. Selena says all right and asks what the hell is going on. Malcolm says Eldrick has taken control of the city and rebelled. The mage is surprised. The protagonist smiles, thinking he's finally lost his patience. Selena asks what they should do, saying that to suppress the border guards she brought all available mages from the guild, leaving no one in the city to act as a full agent. Rain says not to worry. At the moment Eldrick took control of the city to rebel, he had already lost. Elsewhere, the young master approaches on his horse and calls for Eldrick, asking if he's been forced into a difficult situation because of him. Calgar smiles and asks what he plans to do in Iceland today. The young master says he's curious to know why he betrayed him. Eldrick asks why, then says it's because he simply left him in this useless place. Back then, his father and Eldrick joined forces to establish an empire. After his father became the great leader, he not only failed to treat him as he deserved, but instead cast him and his family into this remote wasteland. He wrote to him many times, hoping to be transferred to a more prosperous place, but all requests were rejected, and it's all his father's fault. If he wants to blame someone, blame him for being cold and heartless. These are the people who conquered the world with his father at the time, but in the end did not receive the treatment they deserved. And they're not rebelling, they're just taking back what they conquered. The protagonist says he thought he would give a noble reason. In the end, it's just a dull dispute over interests, and he'll give him a chance. If he wants to survive, leave the city and surrender immediately. If he waits until he himself invades the city in 3 days, don't blame him for being ruthless. The people ask, in 3 days? Does he know how long it will take to invade Iceland? Calgar laughs, saying he's probably afraid. The people call him a fool, saying he talks too much and does nothing. Eldrick says he's so confident and asks if he has the courage to bet with him. Rain asks what bet. Calgar asks if in 3 days, if he can't break through Iceland's city wall, how about surrendering obediently and letting him take over? The young master asks, break through? Eldrick laughs and says if he does break through, then he can do whatever he wants, asking what he thinks and if he dares to accept the bet. Selena says there's no need to listen to him. They can fight them slowly. The maid says she's already reported the rebellion to the Grand Duke. They just need to wait for the Grand Duke to send troops to destroy them. There's no need to make such a reckless bet. Calgar asks why he's so quiet. Did a cat get his tongue? He says he must be scared. Just now he was talking about invading the city in 3 days and calls him a coward, saying if he's got the skill, then accept the bet, and asks what he's afraid of. The protagonist says that if he wants to humiliate himself, then he'll oblige him and will accept the bet. He hopes he'll keep his word after 3 days. Eldrick says that's great. Everyone there will be witnesses today, and it's a deal. And by the way, he almost forgot to tell him something. The Orvis Empire army has received word of his rebellion, and their forces will probably arrive at the border fortress in 10 days. So he'd better not get captured by the enemy when that happens. Elsewhere, they are inside a tent, and Selena says that although Iceland's city walls look dilapidated, they're still difficult to break through by force alone. A soldier says they should let them escape south, and when the Grand Duke's army arrives, they can attack Iceland. The protagonist says not to worry. Iceland's city walls will be brought down in 3 days, and what worries him now is the Orvis army. He asks if his maid has gathered enough firewood and hay bales. Leah says everything is ready, and according to his request, they've found a nearby lake. Rain says to do as he said. Have the mages use ice magic on the lake. The water temperature needs to be lowered, preferably to around 0 degrees. Selena wonders if these things will really break through Iceland's city wall. The young master replies not to worry. Iceland's city wall will only last at most 3 days. Later, at Iceland's city gate, the protagonist approaches on his horse and orders the attack. The soldiers rush in wearing armor, carrying firewood and shields. They shield themselves as they move. Eldrick watches in confusion, wondering if these people are attacking the city without weapons, why they're carrying firewood, and if they're just going to drop it and leave. He asks what's going on and if this has ever happened when he was defending the city. The guard says they've never seen this and asks if maybe he's planning to set the city wall on fire. Calgar hits him and asks about setting stones on fire, telling him to listen when he's speaking nonsense. The guard puts his hand on his face and says he really can't think of anything else. The man calls to him and says it really is burning. They really do plan to set the city wall on fire. Eldrick asks if they're really going to burn stone, calling the young man an idiot. The guard approaches and asks if he wants the mages to put out the fire or shoot the soldiers carrying firewood with arrows until they're eliminated. Calgar replies there's no need. The few mages they borrowed from the Orvis Empire can't be used until the most critical moment, and they can't waste magical power here, nor waste arrows on them. In 3 days, he'll humiliate him on the city wall. The fire grows more intense. At the city lord's mansion, someone approaches with a report, saying it seems the other side isn't planning to keep setting fires. Eldrick asks if they burned all their firewood for the winter, and tells everyone to come watch the young fool surrender to him. Voices say today is the last day of the bet between the two, and Calgar must have won. It's true. The city wall is blazing hot. Even getting close to it is uncomfortable. The protagonist approaches on his horse with his soldiers, and Eldrick asks if he plans to put out the fire and then surrender. Rain says he's giving him and the other nobles one last chance. Surrender now or lose your lives later. Calgar asks if there's something wrong with his brain, why he thinks they would surrender, and if he's forgotten the bet from 3 days ago. Today is the last day, and if Iceland can't be invaded before sunset today, he must surrender obediently, and asks if he wants to damage his honor in front of both armies' soldiers. An old man laughs and says, "That's right. He should be thinking about how to invade the city, and if he'll really go back on the bet." The young master says that in that case, don't blame him, and tells the mage to do it. Selena raises her arm, releasing powerful, intense magic and launching it. Eldrick orders his mages to quickly be on guard. The mage unleashes her strong magic, and the enemy mages cast a magic barrier. A massive explosion occurs. They watch closely, and Calgar laughs, saying this made him laugh. She actually missed her magic shot, and he didn't think she was only capable of that until he notices something, and it begins to rain. The protagonist orders all troops to follow commands and attack. He thanks the mage and holds her, thinking he didn't expect her to be able to cause climate changes. This will help solve droughts in the future. Selena asks if the method will really work. Rain says not to worry. The moment the cold water hits the city wall, Iceling's wall will cease to exist. The maid tells him to look quickly. After the soldiers throw several buckets of water to put out the fire, the wall begins to crack and make noises. Eldrick wonders what's happening, why the city wall is making that noise, and whether this is something only an extremely powerful magic could cause. People ask what's going on and what that sound is, saying the city wall seems to be collapsing. Calgar says it's nonsense and asks how that's possible, until he notices something and they fall to the ground as the wall is broken. The young master says the city wall has been breached and orders all troops to attack. Those who surrender and don't resist can be captured. Anyone who persists in resisting should be eliminated immediately. They may attack. The soldiers charge in with their weapons. Selena wonders if she really caused it to collapse, thinking that even with her full strength, it would be difficult to cause that level of damage. How did the young master do it? The protagonist says it's fine, and to head home. Later, in the same place, with everything destroyed and people lying on the ground, Eldrick thinks he didn't expect him to be so capable and underestimated him, and that he needs to escape quickly. If he can just hold out until the Orvis Empire's northern army arrives, he'll surely survive, until he hears them. The three lords are in front of him, asking where he's going, saying they don't want to lose their lives yet so they can only harm him, and asking if he's trying to escape. People shout that he's truly amazing, that's right. A wall that strong was broken in 3 days. On top of that, aside from a few fools who twisted their ankles while carrying supplies, there were no casualties. The mage says she begs him, please tell her how he did it. The protagonist thinks that if he doesn't explain, she won't enter the city, and says it's based on the principle of thermal expansion and contraction in physics. Selena asks what the principle of thermal expansion and contraction is. Thermal expansion and contraction refers to the property of an object expanding when heated and shrinking when cooled. The principle is based on the law that the state of motion of particles, such as atoms or molecules, inside an object changes with temperature. When the temperature rises, the vibration amplitude of the particles increases, causing the object to expand. When the temperature falls, the vibration amplitude of the particles decreases, causing the object to shrink. Rain says they'll explain the rest after dealing with that idiot Eldrick. After the walls are destroyed, he rides through the area and someone calls out to him, asking to be spared. The young master asks if he's trying to play a trick on him. An old man on the ground calls out, saying he was deceived by Eldrick before being betrayed. His partner agrees, saying they wanted to capture him and make him pay for his crimes. But unexpectedly, he set them up instead. The protagonist says he gave them 2 chances, but it's a pity they didn't take them. The old man says they're willing to hand over all their property, only asking that their lives be spared. Rain says if they eliminate them, the property will still be theirs. The two tremble, and the old man says no one will be loyal after that. That's tyranny. The young master says he's wrong. People aren't loyal to anyone. People are only loyal to their own interests, and they've lived so long, yet still don't understand that. Capture these fools and wait for judgment. Elsewhere, Calgar says he really did break the wall. The masked man asks how he did it. Eldrick replies that it seems the city wall was burned for a few days and then doused with water, making it collapse. The masked man asks what nonsense he's talking about. How could there be such a simple way to siege a city? He says there's no way it could be that easy. He must have used some powerful magic. Calgar says whatever it was, they need to flee. When the young man arrives with the soldiers, it'll be impossible to escape. The masked man picks something up, until the protagonist approaches and asks where the two of them are planning to go. Eldrick asks how he got there so fast. Rain says it's thanks to them. When they abandoned the wall and tried to flee, the soldiers following them dropped their weapons as soon as they saw them running away. They didn't resist anymore, so nothing stood in his way. She asks if the masked man is the person behind Eldrick, and if he wears the mask because he's ugly or because his face is scarred. The masked man says he won't be so smug for long. The Orvis Empire's army is already on its way. Originally, if he hadn't destroyed Iceland's city wall, he could have lived for a few more days, but now that the wall is gone, when the Orvis Empire's army arrives, they'll take back all the humiliation from today. The masked man opens an object and the young master tells his maid to stop him, until he is attacked and his mask is broken. The knife is driven into the wall and pieces of the mask fall to the ground. The masked man stares at them. Leah approaches him and wonders if it's her. The item begins to float, the masked man says his name and that he will definitely return, then disappears from the place along with Eldrick. The maid says she is sorry, it was her fault for being too slow and letting him escape. The protagonist tells her not to worry, as he was certain they would leave an escape route. The problem now is that they don't know his identity. Leah says she knows this man, and Rain asks if she's serious and if he's well known. The maid replies, not that closely. The man's name was Ravenclaw Eldwin. He was once a subordinate of the Grand Duke, but later during the war he betrayed the Grand Duke and sided with Grand Duke Soren of the enemy nation. The young master asks if his name is Eldwin and whether he has any relation to Adrian, who was recently executed. Leah answers that yes, originally he was the head of the Eldwin family. Since he did not agree with the master's ideas, he voluntarily left the Eldwin family and joined the Grand Duke. Selena approaches and says the situation is under control, then asks about the Orvis Empire army. She adds that even if all the guild's mages gathered to repair the wall, she doubts there would be enough time. The young man's thermal expansion and contraction magic caused a lot of damage. The protagonist says not to worry about that, he will naturally find a solution. Then they observe the people below. The mage wonders if he really intends to calm the people, but he says he will tell them to avoid panic. Rain uses a megaphone and asks if they can hear him, saying he has something to announce. The Orvis Empire army is marching toward them and will arrive in a few days, and he asks if they heard that correctly. Everyone looks frightened and asks about the army. Selena asks what he's doing. People begin asking if the Orvis Empire is attacking again and if it hadn't ended in the spring, and why they are coming again. Some say to grab their valuables and flee, though they've lived well under the master's rule. The mage says he is too impulsive and that he cannot tell the people such things, and the young master asks why. Selena replies that when people hear someone is coming to attack, they will instinctively rely on the army to protect them. They have no formal military training and it's hard for them to remain calm in the face of danger. The protagonist says she doesn't understand. The ones who must remain calm on the battlefield are the commanders. The ones who least need to be calm are the soldiers. The mage looks surprised. Rain shows a piece of paper and says this is the challenge letter sent to him by the Orvis Empire. It says the entire city of Iceling is full of cowards and fools who would never dare defend their homes, that they would abandon them and flee. The people become furious, demanding to know how those bastards dare to say that, and vowing they won't allow them to come steal food again this year. They will fight even their descendants. The young master says it seems the Orvis Empire knows nothing about them and asks if they are cowards or fools. They answer no, and that they will fight them, and they will make them understand they know nothing about them. The protagonist says that since everyone has the courage to fight, he swears to lead them to purge Orvis's scum from their lands. The people cheer. In the Lord's mansion of Iceland City, Rain is reviewing some papers. The maid approaches and tells him to take this cup of tea and rest. The young master replies there is no time to rest. He must find a solution before the enemy army reaches the border fort. Otherwise, the entire city of Iceland will fall into their hands. Leah asks what he said earlier in the day. The protagonist replies that it was a lie to stabilize the city's people. If they panic, they can forget about defending the city. Even an orderly evacuation would become a challenge, and people will do nothing in panic. The maid says to leave the city now and that she can't watch him be in danger. Rain tells her not to worry as he has asked Malcolm and Selena to remove the children, women, and elderly from the city to evacuate in an orderly manner. It is not yet time to give up. He looks at a book and wonders if this is serious, then asks the maid about it. The book's name is Divine Oil, dark green, and he asks if she knows what it is about. Leah replies she remembers it is something that could burn, some kind of material used in witchcraft rituals. The young master notes something. The color of petroleum is quite varied, ranging from deep red to golden, dark green, black, brown, and even transparent. The color of petroleum is determined by the gum and asphaltene content. The richer in content, the darker the color. The protagonist wonders about oil that can burn, and whether it could be the same thing, and he tells them to take him there quickly, as the mansion records say that this oil is in the warehouse. Somewhere else, he orders them to open the warehouse door. The door opens and Rain tells them to find this thing called Divine Oil, dark green, and reminds them not to use an open flame. If they're not sure, move it outside. It should still be in the barrel. He observes and thinks it's just as he imagined. The city's tax profits had been used for Eldrick's corruption for years. When this crisis ends, that money should immediately be used to fund industry, assuming an engine can be built. The soldiers say they found it. The young master immediately approaches, removes the barrel's lid, and finds a liquid inside. He smiles, thinking the city can be saved. In the Orvis Empire military camp, the hooded man says they failed. Lord Castile says he knew they would fail, but didn't expect them to be so useless. A city lost in 3 days. Eldrick says the young man used a forbidden spell to destroy the city wall, which caused their failure. Otherwise, they definitely would have kept the city under their control. Waldron asks about the forbidden spell and wonders if, to protect his youngest son, Aldarion sent a forbidden spellcaster. The hooded man says not to worry. Such spells cannot be used continuously, especially in such a short period of time, and besides, the city walls were destroyed by the young man and cannot be repaired quickly. Now is definitely a good time to attack. Castile says he doesn't need to be reminded. He is not as incompetent as them, and that they have nothing else to do here. They can return to the Empire and await news. The masked man says he and he himself planned this together, and asks what he means by that. Waldron says he means he is being expelled. The Lord throws the paper to the ground. Ravenlock looks shocked when he sees the paper, says that this war started due to Ravenlock's personal revenge, which fractured the balance, made the people suffer, and covered the territory in plasma. It says they have always aspired for peace, and do not wish to see a scene of desolation for the people of the region. Eldwin grits his teeth and angrily calls him a bastard. Castile orders them to capture this man and imprison him until the war ends. They reply they understand and seize him. Ravenlock says they can't do this. Eldrick trembles in fear, and Waldron asks if perhaps he can say what he thinks. Calgar says to spare his life because he knows a secret and can give him more power in the Empire. Castile looks interested. In the city of Thurland, in the main mansion, Priscilla is focused on some papers when her subordinate calls her and says the letter sent by the young man was written by Leech Alice. Priscilla wonders how her brother is now, as she wants to visit his territory when she has time, until she notices something and widens her eyes. She calls him a bastard, and tells her subordinate to summon that bastard Valus Holker immediately. The subordinate says she understands. Later, still in the same place, a man approaches, kneels on the ground, and asks what happened. The lady says he is bold to dare rebel. Valus asks how that's possible, and how she can believe such an outrageous lie, and whether they didn't open a trade route with her help just last month, saying there's no reason for this. Priscilla throws the paper at him, saying the evidence is exclusive, yet he still dares to make excuses. See for yourself. Holker takes the letter, which says he hopes the letter can be delivered and read without issues. Due to the busy schedule since the young man arrived in the city, it hasn't been as peaceful as he imagined. Together with Grand Duke Castile of the Orvis Empire, they staged a rebellion and plotted with several nobles of the city. Valus looks shocked, and the lady asks if he has anything to say. Holker replies that this was Caesar's personal foolishness and has nothing to do with their family. He did indeed write a letter to that idiot Caesar last month and made it clear he should pay close attention to the young man's words. Priscilla thinks his actions and connections don't seem false and wonders if he really is Caesar's man. Velas asks her to give the Holker family a chance, and they will prove their loyalty. The lady asks what opportunity he wants. Velas replies he will have his only daughter lead an army to aid the master against the Orvis Empire. Priscilla asks if she hasn't just become an adult, and besides, she hasn't even finished her studies at the Knight Academy, saying that if anything happens, his family will have no heir. Holker tells her not to worry, as his family is willing to sacrifice everything for her, and without her, their family would have ceased to exist a long time ago. He asked her to give them the chance to prove their loyalty. The young lady speaks telepathically with her subordinate, telling her to send someone to keep Roland under surveillance. And if she does anything inappropriate, she is to be eliminated that very instant. In the city of Iceling, near a cliff, Castile asks if this is the city of Iceland. Eldrick replies that it is, and as long as he crosses this point, the city will be his. It seems the young man used magic to urgently repair the wall. Previously, it was in much worse condition. And it looks like he even built another moat. Waldron laughs loudly, saying that it seems this young man is an idiot for spending their precious magical power to repair the wall. Calgar asks if, after they repair the city wall, it won't become harder for them, and why he's so happy. Castile says that if the terrain is easy to defend and hard to attack, building a wall can be useless. But this is flat terrain with only a river in the middle, which will not be enough to stop the army from attacking. If the mages still had magical power, they could prevent the army from advancing. If all the mages used up their power to repair the wall, they won't be able to do anything during the attack. Eldrick says that's exactly right, and that he truly is very wise. A soldier says that if they want to capture the city of Iceland, they don't need to attack this fortress. They can send troops to encircle it, then go straight to the city, isolating the fortress. Waldron asks what he means by that, and if he thinks they won't be able to take the fortress. The soldier replies that's not what he meant. He believes they can reduce casualties after all, it's a siege. Castile says there's no war without losses. And besides, part of the troops they brought are recruits, and they can use this opportunity to train them in combat. He tells them to come with him to show that young man on the other side their strength. Maybe he'll even surrender after seeing the Duke. The mage agrees. Elsewhere, the protagonist is sitting and looking at the system, which says to train 5 characters with high attributes. Rain says he has no time to find anyone now. This mission has been stuck for half a month, and he must find a solution quickly. The maid approaches and says that the Grand Duke of the Orvis Empire and his personal mage want to meet him on the city walls. The young master goes outside. Waldron says he'll give him a chance now. The protagonist asks if that idiot is the Grand Duke. Leah answers yes. That fool is the Grand Duke. Castile calls him a bastard and wants to know how he dares to disrespect him like that, saying even his father wouldn't dare disrespect him. Rain asks what the hell he wants there. Waldron replies that he's there to give him a chance to beg for mercy, promising that if he surrenders obediently now, he won't turn this place into a river of plasma. The young master says he'll give him a chance too. If he doesn't want to lose his life here, he should return with his army to his own territory immediately. Castile glares at him and says that clearly he doesn't understand the situation. He personally leads an army of 100,000 men, and if the young master doesn't want to lose his life, he must surrender immediately. The protagonist tells his maid to teach him a lesson. Leah lifts her skirt, pulls out a dagger, and attacks immediately. The mage releases his magic and warns to be careful. A barrier is formed, but the dagger pierces through it. Waldron dodges just in time, but his face is still cut. He starts trembling and muttering. Rain says this is a warning. Next time, his maid won't miss the target. Castile says to leave, and the mage replies yes. The young master orders the mage to prepare for battle because they're going to attack the city. They return to the cliff. A soldier asks what happened to the Lord. Waldron replies that he was attacked by that despicable young man and to organize an attack immediately because he will tie him up and torture him tonight. The soldier says they've been marching non-stop for 3 days to reach the Iceling city border and asks if the attack can't wait until tomorrow so the soldiers can rest for one more day. Castile hits him and calls him an imbecile, asking if he's tired after running for 3 days without sleep, and if they're still soldiers of the great Orvis Empire. The soldier tells him to calm down. Even if the soldiers aren't tired, they still need time to build bridges and prepare their equipment properly. There's no need to rush. All the other soldiers agree. Waldron says they don't know how to fight. Since ancient times, speed has been the most important factor in a beautiful war. The enemy must think they will take another day before attacking. If they strike the city now, they'll catch them by surprise. The soldiers look shocked, and Castile orders them to send word to attack the city immediately. In the Orvis Imperial Barracks, the soldiers are talking about how, after running for 3 days and 3 nights, they've finally arrived and are on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion. Asking which idiot said being a soldier wasn't tiring, his partner asks what he saw and the soldier asks what it was, telling him to stop being dramatic and say it already. The partner replies that he saw some men hunt a sheep and that they'll eat well tonight. The big guy lights up with joy, saying that after running for 3 days and 3 nights, they can finally enjoy a good meal. But then the commander approaches, ordering all men to gather and prepare to attack the city. The soldier asks about attacking the city, saying they've been running for so long without rest and now have no energy left, wondering if they won't even get a meal before battle. The commander tells them to stop complaining. As soldiers, all they need to do is follow orders and to get ready to attack the city now. The soldiers, looking disheartened, reply yes. In Iceland, the soldiers run toward the wall to attack, and the warrior tells the young man to give the order. The protagonist watches the soldiers crossing the water and asks if any of them have ever fought against the Orvis Empire army. The warrior replies that he once had the honor of fighting them. A voice asks why their troops look like they haven't eaten, or if that's just the constitution of their army. The warrior replies that to answer the question, he believes those men are recruits, and besides, they apparently didn't have time to enjoy a meal. Rain asks if they're hungry and whether they don't feed their soldiers. The warrior replies there are 2 possible reasons. First, they didn't have much food, so there wasn't enough for everyone. Second, the young master tells him to continue, and the warrior says the Grand Duke is using these men as sacrifices, making them consume the defenders' resources like arrows and such. The protagonist widens his eyes and asks if their emperor doesn't care about him doing that, and if they aren't citizens of the Orvis Empire. The warrior replies that few lords care about their people, like him and the Grand Duke. Most are like the Grand Duke. Rain thinks they're using others as sacrifices and tells him not to blame him for being ruthless. The warrior says they must have enough arrows to finish off these recruits and asks when they should use them. The young master smiles and says they won't be using arrows. The recruits crossing the water are clearly exhausted. The protagonist tells the mage to have the magicians use freezing wind magic. She agrees. Selena flies up and casts basic freezing wind magic. Castile laughs, saying this young man is truly an idiot. The commander asks why he says that. Waldron replies that he sent recruits to make them waste their arrows. But this fool is wasting the mage's magic power to defend against recruits, to preserve arrows. When the mages run out of magic power, they'll send in their own mages and cavalry to attack the city. The soldiers ask if that would make the city easy to take and say he's so smart. As expected of the Lord, he can come up with such a cunning plan. Castile says the young man will soon be his prisoner. The recruits see a large aura in the sky and ask what's happening. shouting for everyone to run because the enemy is using magic. They cry for help, saying they haven't even married yet, that they don't want to be wiped out, begging not to be killed. Then they realize they weren't attacked and ask what happened and whether someone didn't just say magic was being used. The commander approaches and asks what they're doing there, telling them to grab their weapons and start advancing. They advance. Selena says that magic is so basic, asking if it can really stop the enemy army and suggests using lightning magic instead. The protagonist says it's unnecessary. Since ancient times, people have lost the will to fight because of two things: hunger and cold. Their soldiers can barely stand, much less attack a city. The recruits complain that it's so cold, freezing to the bone, wondering how it can be this cold. They say they don't want to fight anymore and want to go home. The commander calls them a bunch of useless weaklings and asks what they're doing, telling them to attack the city, pick up their weapons, and fight. They reply that it's too cold. Their hands are freezing, they can't even lift their weapons, and they're starving and freezing with no energy left. They should retreat because it's just too cold. The commander says they must report the situation to the Lord immediately, and the rest of them should continue the attack. A soldier reports that there's news from this vanguard. The Lord tells him to proceed and speak. The recruit says his name, then looks to the side, wondering why they have to starve and freeze to death out here while those people enjoy warmth and food inside. He says that the attacks on the front lines aren't going well. The young man used freezing wind magic to delay the assault. The soldiers are hungry and cold, unable to hold their weapons, and he begs for an order to temporarily withdraw the troops. Castile calls him an imbecile, saying they're a bunch of damned cowards, unworthy of being noble soldiers of the Orvis Empire. The recruit says they're not afraid of dying but have no strength because of hunger and cold. Waldron orders that the useless man who dared talk back be eliminated, and says he'll lead the attack himself. The commander says he doesn't need to risk himself. They're willing to give their lives for the duchy. Castile says he has no objections to his loyalty. He just wants his generals to understand what a genius Lord can do. Then Waldron walks to the wall and calls for all mages' attention, telling them to use earth magic to build a bridge so the cavalry can cross. They reply yes, and begin casting, creating a passage over the river so they can pass. Castile orders all troops to advance, saying he will reward the one who captures the young man alive, and to advance and wipe them out. The cavalry charges. The warrior approaches the young man, saying it looks like the Orvis Empire is ready for a direct assault. The protagonist calls his maid and tells her to order that thing be dumped into the moat and at the same time block the passages on both sides of the moat. Leah replies, yes. A liquid is poured into a pipe, falling directly into the water. The cavalry keeps advancing. Meanwhile, in the forest, a unit approaches along with Rosalind Holker, and she urges them to go faster, as nothing must happen to the young man. She remembers her father telling her that the rise and fall of the Holker family lies in her hands, and she reassured him she would make sure the young man wasn't harmed. The soldiers ask to take a break, saying they've been marching for 3 days, and even if she can endure it, the horses can't. Rosalind asks how long until they reach Iceling. A soldier answers they're now 1 day away from the city. She tells him to project the map in front of her, as she wants to see the next marching route. The soldier agrees and says she can take a look. Rosalind thinks the border fortress of Iceland must have been invaded, and now the young man is trapped inside the city, recalling her father, telling her that he had done something in the city a few days ago that made the food supply abundant. Then she notices something, stops her horse, and says she knows Nox is there and needs him to show himself so they can discuss countermeasures. The soldiers look surprised, and a portal opens from which a mage, Nox Ald, steps out. The commander tells them to protect the lady and asks who he is. Rosalind stops him and asks if he's Nox. He says that if she has something to say, she should say it quickly. The girl says she will send her men to count the Orvis Empire's food supplies and take advantage of the situation to capture the troops besieging the city, adding that she knows she was sent to spy on him but needs his help. Ald replies that his orders were to eliminate her if she did anything to harm the young man a days. He received no orders to help her. Rosalind says she knows, but neither of them wants anything to happen to the young man. Nox asks what she wants him to do. The girl says she'll lead her men around the mountain to attack the Orvis army's rear, then go forward to block the upper access of the fortress moat with her magic, and wait for the signal from her mage. Then he will immediately release the water flow from the channel and drown those Imperial dogs. In Varshala, a voice says they hope to reach a consensus, to work together and gain a fortune. Someone looks at a letter, it's an elf, and asks what they think. Ilaria says humans are too greedy and cunning, with no credibility, and believes it's better not to get involved with them. Someone nearby says that being said, they can't feed all the elves on their own strength and have to buy food from humans every winter, so it would be inappropriate to refuse. The Majesty tells Ayuria that she may speak as well, as she's the only one there who has seen the new leader of Iceland. The Saint says she thinks the new city leader is evil and cunning, very arrogant, and she doesn't know how he did it, but he managed what he said. Not only do they have enough food to last the winter this year, they also saved a lot of money. An elf asks if there are interesting people among humans. Ilaria asks if he means intelligent and says she doesn't think so. The tribe's scouts discovered a few days ago that they are fighting again, and she doesn't understand why they wage war every autumn. The premise for them to secure a good deal is that the cute city lord must survive this war, otherwise there's no deal. Her Majesty tells her to calm down for a moment and let her speak her decision, saying that what Salian said makes sense. If the new city lord loses his life, then all agreements will be in vain. So, she has decided to go to the battlefield and see for herself. Meanwhile, in the battle, a voice shouts to fire arrows quickly, not to let them climb the wall and to shoot. Selena asks if they can't do it now. The protagonist replies there's no need to rush. They should wait for the Lord to personally lead the troops, as they can only use this trick once, and they can't let him escape. The mage says, right now. Soldiers leap onto the wall and one says they've breached it. Castile smiles, saying it's done, and to advance and capture the young man alive, repeating again to take him alive. Rain notices the Lord crossing the bridge and orders the mage to proceed. They exchange blows. The warriors say to take them down quickly, as they can't let them get near the master. The young master calls the mage and orders her to throw a fireball into the well. Selena says she understands and casts a low-level fire spell, forming a ball of flames and throwing it. Waldron calls the mages, saying the enemy is firing fireballs and that this is their final counterattack, so they must protect him. The mages unleash their power, creating a barrier, and the soldiers comment that the enemy is draining the mages' magic power, wondering if they have a plan. Castile asks what plan and laughs, saying what kind of plan could they possibly have? All their magic power was spent on that freezing wind. These fireballs are probably the last scrap of magic they can use, and as long as they withstand this counterattack, victory will be theirs. The fireballs keep flying toward the river. Waldron watches and laughs, saying he told them the mages were at their limit and couldn't even properly control the most basic fire magic anymore. The soldiers praise him as a true military genius who will take the city, after which the rest of the Empire's men will surrender. Castile says he's known as one of the pillars of the Orvis Empire, and that boy could never manage it. An explosion erupts and the flames grow far more intense. They panic, asking how this is possible and what is happening. Waldron wonders how this can be and how such a forbidden magic could exist in this land. People cry out, asking what it is and why there's a wall of fire, calling for help. Castile grows nervous, wondering how this could happen since he has already sent all his men. If they're all trapped by the fire, they'll be consumed by the flames. He thinks this young man isn't human, but a demon, and wonders if he intends to burn 100,000 people alive. Soldiers urge him to order a retreat. Waldron orders a quick retreat and tells the mages to extinguish the flames immediately and end the fire. The mages say they have no reserves of magic power left, having spent what remained on the defensive barrier they just cast. The mage wonders if this level of power is on par with forbidden magic, and if such strength was achieved with just a few barrels of oil, without using a drop of magic power. They cry for help. The protagonist watches and thinks that to prevent his people from ending up like that, he must develop industry as fast as possible, then tells the mage he's leaving the rest to her. She replies that she understands and orders all mages to wipe out the soldiers of the Orvis Empire immediately. Later, still in the same place, the fire is still raging, and a voice tells the Lord to go that way. Castile is feeling unwell. Then they head to their tents, and Waldron asks where the guard soldiers are. He notices something above, widens his eyes, and a sword is driven into the ground in front of him as someone lands there. Castile asks who it is. Rosalind says that judging by his clothing, he must be a noble of the Orvis Empire, and she's been looking for him for quite some time. Waldron falls to the ground trembling, asking what she's going to do. The girl asks where the main force is. Holding a whip in her hand, she asks if the young man is safe. Rosalind strikes him and orders him to speak. Castile says he'll talk. The main force was burned alive by the young man's forbidden magic, and that he himself is the Grand Duke, and she can't treat him like this. The girl calls him a bastard and asks how he dares tell such an absurd lie, asking if he thinks she's a fool. She orders them to take him away and beat him until he tells the truth. Later, still in the same place, Rosalind asks how things are going. A soldier replies that the pig is a stubborn man who insists he's the Grand Duke, and also said the 100,000 strong army was completely burned at the fortress of Iceling City by the young man using forbidden magic. The girl slams the table and says to keep beating him until he tells the truth. She also orders the entire army to rest there for now. At nightfall, they will advance to the border fortress and relieve the master's situation. The soldier answers yes. Rosalind walks away thinking that according to that pig, there is an earthen bridge across the moat of the border fortress that was left behind when they attacked the city, making it easier for cavalry to cross. But if they want to invade the fortress, they first need to lure them out and then cooperate with the mage sent by Lady Priscilla. If they bypass the fortress and head straight for the city of Iceland, Then, still in the same place, the girl notices someone approaching and orders an attack on the enemy. The soldiers tell her to be careful and to reveal themselves, and the entire army is on alert. There's no chance of a surprise attack. Someone approaches. It's the elves. Rosalind watches them, wondering if they really are elves, and whether the elves are conspiring with the Orvis Empire. She says these elves are despicable, that they really have allied with Orvis to harm the young man. Ilaria says it's ridiculous. It was that so-called young man who asked to meet the queen, and now they're slandering them. The girl asks if she really expects her to believe such a crude lie, saying she bets they're accomplices of the Orvis Empire. Ilaria demands how she dares insult them, noble elves, and orders the archers to prepare. Rosalind tells her knights to raise their shields and watch out for arrows. Someone casts a spell, creating a spatial barrier. The queen tells them to calm down and explains that the reason she's there is because a young man wrote a letter wanting to discuss a business proposal. If she is his ally, there's no need to fight. If she's his enemy, they'll leave immediately and talk after the war. She asks what she thinks. The girl asks what evidence she has to prove what she's saying. Her Majesty orders Ayuria to bring the letter. The saint hands over the letter, saying it's the handwritten one given to them by the young man. Rosalind wonders if it's really from him, thinking that family crest seals have special magical marks that cannot be forged. She says that until she meets the young man, she will trust them for now. But along the way, she will have someone watch them at all times. The queen says, that's fine. Caution is good for everyone. The girl orders everyone to return and continue resting. The original plan remains. She also orders a few people to watch these elves, and if they make any suspicious move, to report to her immediately. The soldiers answer that they understand. Ilaria says that if they don't even believe them, why do they still want to negotiate? Her Majesty replies that if they trusted them, they wouldn't be human. She thinks to herself that she hopes this young man doesn't disappoint her. The elves' future of destruction needs to be rewritten. The troop moves, and the soldiers say the scouts have returned. The flag of the border fortress is not Orvis's, it's still the Edgar family's banner. Rosalind wonders if everything that man said is true, and thinks there's no time to hesitate. Whatever happens, they must get to the young man's side as soon as possible. She orders them to raise the flag now. Whether the fortress troops are the young man's or not, they must know reinforcements are coming. Everyone must keep advancing after crossing the earthen bridge, heading to Iceland City. No matter the cost, they must reach it tonight. Meanwhile, in Iceland City, all the enemies are defeated. The protagonist clenches his fist, thinking that such a powerful army could have been squeezed to the last drop in an underground factory. The maid calls to him, thinking he's truly kind-hearted, and feeling sad about the elimination of these invaders. She says he doesn't need to feel pity for them. They deserved it. Rain says she misunderstood. A warrior approaches, saying cavalry is coming from this direction of the Empire, and the flag they're waving seems to belong to the Second Lady. Later, in the same place, the young master is explaining that in the future, Iceland will become the fortune of this continent. And as long as she is interested in investing now, she will not only be the builder of this legendary city, but also one of its founders. The queen says that this business plan he mentioned is indeed interesting, but such things make no sense to them elves, who are used to living in coexistence with nature. Even without those things he mentioned, they live well. The protagonist says no. If she thinks that way, her vision is too limited. Demand is never natural, it is created. Her Majesty says that some human needs mean nothing to them elves, and asks his forgiveness for speaking bluntly, but many human empires have been destroyed by their desires. Rain says that what she said is true. In the end, the fall of the human empire will indeed be caused by desire. But desire is also what drives the world forward. Humans wanted to fly, so they invented airplanes. Humans wanted to dive into the sea, so they invented submarines. Humans wanted to explode into the universe, so they invented spaceships. One day, she will be in a skyscraper in the city center, looking down at all that life below, and he guarantees she will experience a satisfaction she has never felt before. The queen thinks she doesn't understand anything he's saying, and wonders what airplanes and submarines are. She says his confidence is rare among the humans she has met, but reminds him that they elves are different. For thousands of years, they have not been slaves to desire, and asks if they can change that just because of these commercial districts he mentioned. The young master replies, of course, and says that if she is willing to invest, she will see a different future. Her Majesty thinks about the future, the elves' future, and wonders if cooperating with this human could prevent the future she foresaw. She says his eloquence is truly impressive, but such reasons alone aren't enough, and she needs time to discuss it with her tribe. The protagonist says there's no problem. He will await the investment, and asks them to bring the things. He hands her a paper. The queen asks what it is. Rain replies it's an invitation to the completion ceremony of the Iceling City Dam, a VIP seat, and insists she witness the first step of the city's industry. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the troops keep marching and say they have urgent news. The young man is safe and is now clearing the battlefield below the border fort. Rosalind wonders about them being safe and how that's possible, and whether the Orvis Empire didn't bring an army of 100,000 men. She wonders if what he said was true, and if there really is a master forbidden mage helping the young man, but then thinks to forget it. There's no time for that now. She needs to go help him as quickly as possible. Later, the troop approaches the wall quickly, but it's closed, so they stop their horses. The girl dismounts, and the guards say it's that way. Inside a room, she enters and says she is the knight sent by Lady Priscilla to help him, and that she failed to arrive when he needed her most and deserves punishment. The protagonist asks if her older sister asked her to come. Rosalind replies yes. Rain asks why she was coming from the direction of the Orvis Empire. The girl replies they received the rescue order 3 days ago, and she thought he had abandoned the border fortress and retreated to Iceling. So she diverted the army there and blocked Orvis's retreat. The young master asks if it really took 3 days from her sister's territory, saying it's hundreds of kilometers, and asks how they got there since there are no railways yet. Rosalind asks what a railway is. The protagonist replies that it doesn't matter since they worked hard and tells them they may rise. The girl says it wasn't hard and that this is the least the Holker family should do, since her stupid uncle caused him trouble. Rain is surprised and asks if she's from the Holker family, realizing she's Caesar's niece. Rosalind says she begs him to give her family a chance, and that he can punish them however he wants. She won't complain. The young master watches her. The girl lowers her head, thinking the young man left her waiting all day. Even knowing it would be hard to earn his trust, she didn't even get to meet with him. She wonders where the future of herself and her family will go. The protagonist approaches and apologizes for the delay, telling her not to be nervous and that he came to discuss something with her. Rosalind agrees and thinks now he should give her a chance. Rain asks if she would become his ally. The girl looks surprised. The two stare at each other. The young master says he's impressed by her battlefield judgment, that her values are worth cultivating, and whether it's the courage to lead troops in a rear maneuver or a bold charge into battle, it makes him think she's a very talented person. Rosalind thanks him for the praise, saying that's what subordinates should do. The protagonist asks if she wants to be his. The girl says she understands, and if he wants to use her to make up for his dissatisfaction, then she'll give everything. Rain says to wait a moment, something is wrong with this conversation, and asks if there's been a misunderstanding, saying especially the word compensate is something he's never thought about before. Rosalind kneels and says that although her dream is to become a knight and serve at his side, if he needs to use her humble body to make up for the wounds her uncle caused him, she won't complain. The young master tells her to stop, saying it's a misunderstanding. He wants her to be his subordinate, nothing more. The girl asks what he means. The protagonist replies that he means whether or not she is willing to join his ranks, and that he will not hold her or her family accountable for Caesar's crimes. He coughs and asks if she will serve him as a knight. Rosalind's eyes widen as she realizes that being his knight doesn't mean being his plaything, but truly his knight, something that has always been her dream, and she says that becoming his knight would be her greatest honor. Later, Ryan is in a room writing to his sister, telling her that the crisis in Iceland City has been resolved, that the knight she sent is exceptional, and instructing his maid to send this letter to his second sister tomorrow, along with an invitation to the dam's completion ceremony. Leah replies that she understands. The young master thinks he must find talented people quickly. He notes that he has secured an apprentice. The maid asks what they should do with the Grand Duke of Castella, who was captured by the knight. The protagonist says he had completely forgotten about him and asks where he is now. Leah replies that he's in the dungeon of Iceland City. Later, in a prison, Ryan approaches and tells the Grand Duke that they meet again. Castile calls him a despicable brat and says he's finished. The young master asks what he means by that and whether he realizes he's the prisoner now. Waldron asks if his father told him and says it's clearly stated that spell mages from all countries are not allowed to participate in wars between ordinary people, yet yesterday on the battlefield he broke that rule. Soon all the forbidden spell mages on the continent will come to hunt the Edgar family. The protagonist asks about a forbidden spell mage, wondering if he means Selena. Castile replies that Selena is just a high-level mage. He's talking about the forbidden spell mage who unleashed destructive power on the battlefield. Rain asks if he's referring to the explosion caused by those barrels of oil, and says that if the forbidden spell he's talking about is an explosion, then it's just a misunderstanding, because he can make that kind of explosion as much as he wants. Waldron says that's impossible. Only a forbidden spell mage can wield that kind of power. Such world-destroying force is definitely not something a skinny noble like him could do. The young master says that whether it was a forbidden spell mage or destructive power, it's in the past now. The only reason he came here is to tell him something and asks who his superior is or what exactly he's planning. Castile says there's no superior behind this. Orvis Empire warriors don't need any reason to crusade against the cowards of his Caledorial Empire. The protagonist asks about a crusade, saying he makes him laugh, and explains that he's reviewed the records from Iceland City. Every spring they cross the border to provoke them, sparing no expense to seize cities and territories, but they never occupy them and never leave even a single soldier there. In autumn, they immediately withdraw their troops, as if they have a reason to leave. Rain asks if he thinks such actions can hide anything, saying that the Grand Duke of Castella, or Emperor Maliko himself, must have other purposes for this crusade. Waldron says it's because they don't care about occupying barren land like his. What the Orvis Empire needs is to declare strength to the world. The young master asks whether declaring strength means testing something unknown. Castile says he doesn't understand what he's talking about. The protagonist says he should think about it carefully in prison. As he walks out, he thinks that every year the invasion seems like a meaningless drama. Behind it, there must be a conspiracy yet to uncover. They must develop industry immediately. The feeling of being controlled is unpleasant. 10 days later, at the port of Silver Waves, Priscilla looks over her third brother's letter and tells her subordinate to tell that fool Willas that her brother likes his daughter, so he can rest easy now. Gwen replies that she understands. The lady says this invitation letter mentions something about a dam completion ceremony and asks if she knows what a dam is. The subordinate replies no, saying her humble self is too ignorant and inexperienced to comprehend the young man's brilliant wisdom. Priscilla says in that case they will go to her brother's territory for a few days and see this dam. Gwen replies that she understands. The lady adds that, by the way, she wants her help in finding some girls of the same age. She wants to see what type her brother likes. In the imperial palace of the Orvis Empire, a voice says that the Grand Duke's capture will definitely shake the army's morale. And if he leaks his secret, it will cause even more trouble, asking who told him to act so recklessly just to end up in this situation. The emperor says that's enough, and asks what's the point at this stage of finding out who's more at fault, saying they need a solution, not an argument. The long-haired man suggests perhaps sending someone to Iceland City to try negotiating with them. Two men call him a scoundrel, asking how the Orvis Empire could even consider negotiating peace with such a barbaric nation, and whether bowing to the Caledonial Empire wouldn't be a disgrace to their own empire. The long-haired man replies that if Castile leaks the empire's secrets, all the plans they've been preparing for years will be ruined, and urges the emperor to make the right decision. The emperor says that peace negotiations can be arranged and asks if there are any suggestions for suitable candidates. Someone with enough status to represent the dignity of the Orvis Empire, but also with sufficient courage and wisdom. The long-haired man thinks there's something strange in the emperor's words. Something as simple as peace talks wouldn't be difficult as long as the minimum compensation is determined, and wonders if the emperor might be thinking of something else. The emperor, judging by Craven's expression, asks if he already has someone in mind. Craven says he would like to recommend someone, Lady Wilvina, the only daughter of Duke Richard. Voices shout that he's crazy, reminding everyone that her father was recently imprisoned for offending the emperor. The emperor thinks Craven is very clever and always knows what he's aiming for, and asks why he would recommend the daughter of a criminal. Craven says he has 3 reasons. First, she is the only daughter of Duke Richard, and her noble status would show sincerity. Second, he's heard that although she only recently came of age, she is eloquent and decisive. Third, and most importantly, Wilvina could use this opportunity to atone for her father's crimes and prove herself so that His Majesty might pardon Duke Richard. The others present say that what he says makes sense. The Emperor says he'll put Craven in charge of the matter and to ensure the Duke's only daughter is safe during the trip. Craven replies that he understands. Elsewhere, in another room, the Emperor asks if they know what to do on the return journey with Wilvina and Castile. A masked man replies to rest assured. They will certainly lose their lives in the territory of the despicable Caledonial Empire. The Emperor says that the Orvis envoy being eliminated by the Caledonial Mafia will now give them one more reason to declare war. Elsewhere, merchants are selling fresh fruit, calling for civilians to take a look. They also have fresh fish. They spot the young man walking by and ask if he's come to buy something. The protagonist says yes, that he's just strolling through the city to see if they need anything. The merchants say that thanks to him, their lives are much better. Before they lived worse than animals, but now they've finally turned things around. Then a voice calls him a brat, saying if he can't speak properly, he should keep quiet. Rain says they seem quite busy. They bid farewell to the young master. The protagonist watches people walking on the street and analyzes their data, thinking it seems very hard to find high attribute talents among common people. He's been wandering through various places in Iceland City these past few days and hasn't found even one suitable talent. He checks the system again, seeing he needs to cultivate 5 characters with high attributes, and he has only 1. Wondering if he should ask his second sister and older brother for talent. Then he decides no. Their territories have their own difficulties, and he should rely only on himself. Besides, his second sister already gave him Rosalind, so it would be wrong to ask for more. Rain closes his eyes. The maid holds him, saying he's been very tired these past 3 days and should rest a bit. and that she sent people to post multiple notices around the city asking those who think they have talent to come see him. The young master thinks that those who recommend themselves are undoubtedly talented, excellent workers for his factory, but the problem is, his factory can't open yet. The investment situation with the elves has made no progress, and the dam will take another 15 days to finish construction. Making mages study chemistry is a crime against nature. He recalls the mages and the mage herself saying he was their god and thinks that this dam system has also given him an extremely difficult task. It's hard as hell. Then he hears someone calling another person a liar, asking how they dare show their face in the city again, until the protagonist notices someone beside him. The boy says to trust himself and that this time there won't be any problem. The young master opens a system message, checking the boy's data, and gets excited, thinking, finally. Armando is holding a potion in his hand and says he promises it will work this time. Just drip a drop onto food and he can preserve fruits for a year. The attendant tells him to stop talking nonsense and calls him a liar, saying that last time he tricked him into buying insect repellent and he lost an entire crate of apples. Cresta says that was an accident. His insect repellent is not suitable for soft fruits like apples. The merchant says not to lie to himself because he won't be fooled again. Armando tells him not to push the boy and to just listen to what he has to say. Rain thinks he never imagined such talent could exist in a place like this. Leah wonders if that alchemist who only talks nonsense has caught the young master's favor because she can't allow him to be deceived by that kind of person. Cresta squats down on the ground, dejected. Thinking there's no fat cows today, he's starving. The protagonist extends his hand and says he's very interested in his potion, asking if he could introduce it to him. Armando gets excited, thinking the heavens have smiled on him, and says he can tell from afar that he's an expert, asking what kind of medicine he'd like to acquire because he has everything. The young master asks who he is and why he's never seen him in the city of Iceland. Cresta introduces himself and says he's an alchemist who rarely comes to the city. Rain asks if he's here today to promote his products. Armando says if he has any request, he can count on him, as he promises to make a potion that will satisfy him. The maid tells her master not to believe in people like alchemists. Most of them are liars. The protagonist says not to worry, it's still unclear who's deceiving who. Leah is confused, and the young master asks how much those potions there cost. Armando says he really knows his stuff, that one there can make objects glow at night, another lets whoever drinks it run faster, and the last one brings joy to him and the maid all night long. Rain says it's all garbage and asks if there's nothing good there. Cresta says he can insult him all he wants, but if he insults his potions, he can't complain about what happens next. Leah's aura changes and she asks what he just said, and Armando says her master's maid is making him a little scared. The protagonist says that the potion that makes objects glow at night is actually zinc beryllium silicate phosphor, which has low luminous efficiency and is toxic, suggesting he use calcium halophosphate phosphor instead, which is the opposite. Cresta asks how that's possible, how could he know the recipe, saying that recipe is his ultra secret and he's the only one in the whole world who knows it. The young master asks about ultra secret recipes and says it's a joke because that's basic chemistry knowledge. If what he calls alchemy is only at that level, then he thinks alchemy isn't anything special. Armando asks about basic and if he's kidding, asking where he heard all that, saying he must have taken a look at his alchemy notes. Rain finds it hilarious and asks what could possibly be so important to read in the notes of an alchemist who will starve if he doesn't sell potions, and offers to give him a chance. If he swears loyalty to him, he'll make him understand real alchemy. Cresta asks about swearing loyalty and who he is. Leah answers that the person standing before him is the new lord of the city of Iceland and the second son of the great Duke Aldarion of the Caledonial Empire. Armando says it looks like he caught a big fish, but he'd rather starve than become a noble's dog. The protagonist says it seems he's very bothered by his identity. Cresta says this humble servant wouldn't dare be dissatisfied with a noble lord. After all, you shouldn't get angry with a dog. The maid tells him to apologize to the master immediately. Armando asks if that doesn't happen, will they eliminate him? Saying the noble's way of solving things is really primitive. Leah says he's courting his end. The young master steps in front and tells her to stop, saying he doesn't know what he suffered because of the noble class in the past and doesn't want to know. He'll give him a choice. He can offer him well-developed and comprehensive knowledge of chemistry and physics, and he'll have the opportunity to change the world. Cresta stays quiet, listening. Rain says, of course, if he wants to waste his life in some alley in Iceland, he wouldn't care. Armando says they're all liars, only caring about their own pockets, and he'll never agree with them. The system notifies that his loyalty toward the host has decreased. The protagonist thinks this is bad. Not only did he fail to convince him, but he also made him hostile toward him. Cresta says that as for nobles, he wouldn't believe a single word they say, until a voice calls him brother, and it's a little girl. Armando runs to her immediately, asking why she's here, saying this isn't a place for her and she should go hide. Yelena asks why, and Cresta answers that this man is an evil noble who will hurt her. The little girl recognizes the master, and the young master asks if she knows him. Yelena replies that her mother said they can live well thanks to him. Rain asks if her father worked on the dam. She says Irina and her mother praise her father every day for having worked hard for him. Armando says he's really a noble with a filthy heart, exploiting the people of Iceland. The protagonist asks where he got that from. Cresta says she's wearing such worn-out clothes, obviously being exploited and oppressed by him. The nature of nobility really hasn't changed. The maid says he's the person who cares most for the people in all of Iceland and asks how he can slander him. Yelena asks what nonsense he's talking about, saying the master is a great lord. He not only hired everyone to work, but also provided food and shelter so no one would go hungry or cold. And if he doesn't know anything, he shouldn't talk nonsense. The young master says the main reason she and the others can't wear nice clothes is because the light industry hasn't developed yet. Once it does, people all over Iceland will be able to wear beautiful clothes. Armando says that although he doesn't know what light industry means, he's sure no noble would care about the people. They, corrupt nobles, are only trying to fill their own pockets. The little girl asks how he can say that about her brother. Cresta turns his back, saying he's not interested in seeing nobles pretending to be good lords, and that he should be careful with him too. Rain thinks he can't let this guy walk away. This kind of talent can't be lost. Until the protagonist feels something strange and asks what happened, and the young master ends up collapsing on the ground. Later, somewhere else, Rain is lying down until he wakes up. His mate is beside the bed and says he's finally awake. The protagonist says he's fine and not to worry. Leah asks how he can be fine. He's been overexerting himself, hasn't been resting well, had to go out looking for talents, and got so tired he fainted. The young master touches her hand and apologizes for making her worry, saying he'll be more careful from now on, and asks where Armando is. The maid says that after he fainted and she immediately brought him back to the mansion, that alchemist Armando started to leave, but came back after seeing him collapse. Rain asks if he returned. Leah says he gave him some medicine, saying it would cure the illness, and then left. The protagonist asks if it was his medicine that lowered his fever. The maid asks how she could let him take medicine made by someone of unknown origin, saying she only placed the medicine Armando prescribed on his table and the one who cured him was a doctor from the city. The young master says he'll take a look at the medicine he prepared. Leah tells him to wait there, as she'll go get it. She shows him the medicine, and Rain says that judging by the color and texture, it looks quite professional. Tomorrow he'll meet a doctor and ask how good it is. The maid asks if he really wants to recruit that boy, since he seems hostile toward nobles and has an extremely unpleasant attitude. The protagonist says he not only has talent, but is also a rare genius, thinking the problem is that he's so prejudiced against nobility, it would be good to know the reason. Later, in a cabin, Armando walks to a counter, picks up a frame with a photo of when he was young with a woman. He runs his hand over the frame, calling her teacher, and says he met a strange noble today. Not only can he analyze alchemical formulas just by looking, but he also explains a lot of things he doesn't understand, and even Yelena likes him a lot. Cresta opens a notebook and says not to worry, because he'll never be fooled by nobles. He'll complete his research and then avenge his teacher for good. He'll make those greedy nobles pay. Liesl Grant was the most unconventional alchemist in the city of Iceland 15 years ago. Liesl was not only a genius in the field of alchemy, but also an idealist who firmly believed that the purpose of alchemy was to benefit the public rather than serve the powerful. Liesl adopted the orphan Armando, and not only did she raise him, but she also taught him all her knowledge of alchemy. Cresta's relationship with Liesl was more than just master and disciple. He considered her his own mother. Liesl didn't just teach him how to make potions and design complex mechanical devices, but also how to find a balance between humanity and morality. Liesl's alchemy research displeased a noble in Iceland at the time, and that noble broke into her house with guards. He stole her research results and slandered her for studying forbidden alchemy. One day, Liesl lost her life in a deliberate accident. Armando was only 15 years old that day. After that, he gathered all the unfinished notes and research Liesl had left behind and vowed to complete her work. Armando still carries the heavy burden of the past and the lonely responsibility. After the saint tells the master what happened, the protagonist says his story is very moving, but it has nothing to do with his problem and asks if she knows where she is now. The irritated saint asks if he can't show a little empathy, but the young master replies that empathy is not edible and doesn't solve problems. People must always move forward. No matter what happened the day before, they still have to go to work as expected the next day. The saint says he should go to Liesl's former residence, the place he visited most often. Not only are her research notes there, but also the remaining research equipment. Rain says it's simple, now they know where he is, so they should go there without wasting time, and asks again if she knows what Liesl was researching. The saint says she remembers it was something about steam. The protagonist's eyes widen immediately, and he asks what she just said, telling her to say it again. The saint repeats that it was something about steam, though she doesn't remember the details, and asks what's wrong. The protagonist says that if what she remembers is the same as what he's thinking, then from today they will be able to completely change the way this world produces and lives. Ayuria asks if it's really that amazing, because she heard it was just a toy or something like that. The young master pulls her and tells her to take him there immediately, and the saint says she understands and tells him to stop pulling. She's going. Rain thinks it can only be a steam engine. If Liesel really researched that, she must have had detailed diagrams and experimental records. The steam engine was far too old-fashioned in his past life for him to have studied it in detail. He only knew the theory and some historical knowledge. As a mechanical engineer, he has an almost innate understanding of mechanical structures. Although he had always wanted to recreate the grandeur of the steam engine in this world, he had always lacked the main diagrams and key ideas. If he can obtain the notes Liesel left behind, he will be able to build upon her research and restore the glory of the steam engine. The industrial age begins now. Elsewhere, in the cabin, Armando is working on some things until someone calls him. Cresta immediately covers the engine with a cloth, thinking he can't let this guy see what his master left behind. Then the protagonist approaches him, and Armando asks what he's doing there, saying he's not welcome. The young master asks where the notes his master left behind are, because he wants to see what she was researching. Cresta says that although he doesn't know where he got the information about the notes, he advises him to give up that idea. He will never hand over his master's notes. The saint says they're not there to steal anything, and adds that the young master just came to see if there's anything in Miss Liesel's alchemy notes that could make life better for everyone in the city. Armando steps closer to the master, points a blade at him, and tells him to leave because this is no place for filthy nobles. The maid thinks she can't allow this fool to hurt the master. She approaches with a blade to his back. Rain signals her to back off and says to leave it to him, and calls Armando an idiot. He says he has no idea what a steam engine is, let alone its true significance, and asks if he thinks this is how he will fulfill Liesel's last wish, saying no, he's wasting her great research. Armando asks who he thinks he is to lecture him, saying he doesn't understand her research at all. The protagonist proposes a bet. Cresta asks what kind of bet. The young master replies that if he can make the alchemical device Liesel left behind work successfully, Cresta will have to work for him obediently. If he fails, he will leave Iceland immediately and never set foot there again, and asks what he thinks. Armando laughs, asking if he's joking, saying it's making him laugh, that a young noble master like him, who can't even recognize all alchemical containers, dares to claim he can make his teacher's legacy work. Rain asks if, based on what he just said, that means he agrees to the bet. Cresta replies that he accepts, but that's not enough. If he loses, not only must he leave Iceland, but he must also kneel and apologize in front of his teacher's grave and asks if he dares agree. The saint says that's too much. After all, the master bears him no ill will. Armando ignores her and only asks if he dares to accept. The protagonist says he has no problem with that and accepts the conditions. If he loses, he will personally apologize to Liesel. Now he says, let him take a look at the steam engine she left behind. He thinks that once he fixes it, Armando will obediently feed the boiler, and he'll see how ruthless he can be in exploiting him. Cresta pulls the cloth off the machine and says this is what teacher Liesel left behind, telling him to be careful not to break it. Leo wonders if the master is really that interested in alchemy and if this thing is so strange, asking what it's for. The young master looks at it and realizes it really is a steam engine, shouting genius, and that Liesel truly was a genius. The maid asks if Liesel's inventions are really that amazing. Rain says yes, no matter the world, anyone who can invent this can only be considered a genius. Armando says of course, and that teacher Liesel was different from other alchemists with undeserved reputations. She was a great person. The protagonist asks if he's been coming here just to keep this machine running. Cresta replies yes, but teacher Liesel never told him how to make it work, and it wasn't written in the research notes. The young master says he'll dismantle it to check the internal structure and see if there's a mechanical problem. Armando asks if he's crazy, saying if it can't be reassembled, his teacher's research will be ruined. Rain asks if he knows who he's talking to, saying there's no machine in this world he can't fix, and tells him to go get a screwdriver or something like that. Cresta asks what a screwdriver is. The protagonist asks if he's joking and says if he doesn't even know what a screwdriver is, how was this thing assembled? Armando replies that of course he used magic, asking how he could not know something so simple, and says everything there was made by a master dwarven craftsman hired by teacher Liesel. This device took an enormous amount of her hard work. It's not something a pampered young noble like him could understand. The young master says that since there's no screwdriver, the maid should let him use her dagger. Rain takes the dagger to work on the machine. Later, still in the cabin, the protagonist says it's so beautiful, so delicate, and that she was a genius, but wonders why parts are missing and asks where the internal components are. Armando wonders how he knew there were still parts inside and asks what nonsense he's talking about, saying the machine is like that, and asks where the spare parts are, adding that if it's not working and he admits defeat, he'll take him to kneel at his teacher's grave right now. The young master tells him not to try fooling him. He knows there must be a central piece used to control the operation of the entire machine, and demands to know where it is. Cresta stays silent for a moment, then says the contents of the machine were taken by a noble. Rain asks why a noble would want a few sets of gears. Armando says those parts were forged from an extremely rare type of dragon crystal ore. When the noble found out, he forcibly took the parts, melted them down, and made a statue of himself. The protagonist asks about the statue, melting down key components just to forge proof of his own stupidity, and demands to know the name of that idiot noble. Cresta looks to the side and says he's a big shot, someone he can't afford to offend. The young master asks if there are some big shots he can't afford to offend, saying he wants to see who would dare obstruct his path to industrialization. Then, still in the cabin, a trembling Armando replies that it's Duke Oscar. The saint is surprised and asks if it's really him. Rain asks if she knows where this Duke Oscar comes from. Ayuria answers that Duke Oscar was actually once a minor noble in the city of Iceling. His achievements in alchemy as a young man were remarkable. Later, he even won the championship at the Imperial Alchemy competition, and received recognition from the Emperor, who not only gave him many resources but also granted him the title of Duke and a territory. The protagonist asks where his territory is. The saint answers that it's in Gransel, on the upper side of the city of Iceland. Leah says the region of Gransel belongs to the domain of Grand Duke Teleros Elroy, and that territory is not under the jurisdiction of House Edgar. The young master asks about Teleros Elroy and recalls that his father mentioned that things weren't going well between him and the Grand Duke. The maid says yes, and that his father has different political views, having clashed with Elroy several times in the Imperial Council, part of the Emperor's deliberate strategy to maintain balance. Rain says it's fine, and there's no need to worry about such troublesome matters for now, and asks about Duke Oscar, saying he'll remember this. The loss of those melted gears will cost him 10 times, 100 times more. Ayuria asks if he's going to confront Duke Oscar directly, and if that wouldn't be dangerous. The protagonist asks dangerous, saying he's the dangerous one. Since he dared destroy something so valuable, he must pay the price. Armando asks if he really intends to go against Duke Oscar. The young master tells him not to worry. Not only will he get the steam engine running again, but he'll also show Duke Oscar what true value is. Then asks if, since the core parts have been destroyed, there are any design drawings for them in Liesel's notebook. Cresta says no. His teacher didn't leave any drawing of that in the alchemy notes. However, he remembers that she was supposed to have discussed the production of the parts with the dwarven master craftsman. Rain asks if that means the dwarf knows about them. Armando says yes, but that he's gone there several times and the craftsman refused to meet him. The protagonist puts a hand on his shoulder and says that since the craftsman won't meet him, he'll try himself. Cresta says not to get his hopes up. The guy has a strange temper. Elsewhere, a voice tells them to get lost. He doesn't have time to entertain them. The saint calls him Uncle Bram and says the master has done much for the people of Iceland, so he shouldn't treat him that way. The dwarf says he knows what he's been doing recently and asks if he's eliminated some corrupt nobles and solved the people's food problems. The saint says yes, that the young man is a rare good lord who loves the people as if they were his own children. Bram asks what there is to boast about. Shouldn't that be what a lord is supposed to do? Just as he, as a blacksmith, must forge iron for others. The young master says that's right. As a lord, he should manage his territory well and ensure the people have enough food and clothing, which is why he's here today. The dwarf wonders how this boy can say such a thing and asks if that means he's here to request something be built. Rain says yes, he needs the design for the gear Liesel made for the steam engine. And even better if the dwarf could forge it himself. Bram's eyes widen and he tells them to leave immediately. He's not making that damned thing. The protagonist asks why. The dwarf answers that it was those gears that got her killed. If he hadn't insisted she use dragon crystal ore for safety, she wouldn't have gotten into trouble and ended up finished off by that bastard noble. He won't make anything like that for anyone again. Armando tells him to wait and asks if he didn't just say a blacksmith's job is to forge iron for people, calling him a double-standard mutt. Bram tells him to shut up. He said you shouldn't fight, and that's final. Even with dragon crystal ore, it wouldn't work. The young master says to wait. He keeps talking about dragon crystal ore and asks if it means only gears forged with dragon crystal ore can keep Liesel's machine running. The dwarf asks what he's getting at. Rain says what he means is that it's unlikely one can rely solely on that material, and asks if it's truly impossible to forge the necessary gears from common iron ore. Bram slams the table, calling him a foolish brat, telling him to stop talking nonsense, melting common iron ore into liquid. Only dragonkind in the entire continent can do that. The protagonist thinks it's just as he suspected, and asks if his furnace's temperature isn't high enough to melt iron ore. The dwarf says there isn't a single furnace on the continent capable of melting iron ore into liquid iron, and asks if he didn't know that. The young master asks if he said he could build a furnace capable of melting iron ore. Would the dwarf believe him? Bram's eyes widen, and he tells him to stop bragging. If he could really build such a furnace, the forging level of the entire empire would be turned upside down, and he's just a brat from a noble family. How could he speak with such audacity? Rain says to leave aside whether it's audacity for now. If he can build a furnace that melts iron ore, will he agree to forge Liesel's gears? The dwarf says fine. If he can build such a furnace, he'll forge them. The protagonist thinks he's finally accepted and says it's a deal. Bram says if he fails, he'd better disappear immediately. The dwarf slams the door, and the young master thinks that iron ore's melting point is 1,538 degrees Celsius. While this furnace's current temperature is far from that, it also lacks a secondary oxygen supply system, meaning the fuel's thermal effect isn't maximized. Rain takes a hammer, examines it, and begins dismantling the furnace. The saint and the alchemist shout at him, and Iuria asks what he's doing. Armando asks if he's lost his mind. He's just destroyed the old man's furnace, so how will he forge the parts now? The protagonist smiles and tells them not to worry. He's not just messing around. These two openings are secondary oxygen supply channels he's specifically designed. With them, the furnace's combustion efficiency will at least double, and the temperature will reach what's needed to melt iron ore. The saint asks if this will really work, and if such simple modifications can truly raise the temperature that much. The young master says not to underestimate the power of science. Once they add fuel and try it shortly, this furnace will certainly melt iron ore into liquid iron. The dwarf says iron ore is tough. Then Bram notices his broken furnace, rushes over, and asks how he dares destroy it. Does he have any idea how much effort it took to forge? He says he'll teach him a lesson today. Rain says he knows Bram is furious, but guarantees this new furnace can melt iron ore. The dwarf asks if he thinks forging is a game, if he really believes he knows more than this old man, if he has any idea how hard iron ore is, saying a normal furnace's temperature isn't even close, and now he's made 2 holes in it, which will only cool it faster. The protagonist says the iron ore is right there. The fuel isn't lacking. Just put it in and see if the furnace works. Bram says this old man wants to see his trick. If it can't melt the ore, he'll beat him up today. Then, still there, the dwarf puts the ore into the furnace, waiting to see if it works. Bram's eyes widen. How is this possible? The ore has melted. The saint, surprised, asks if it really melted, saying the iron ore was indeed turned into liquid iron. Armando, shocked, says, "This can't be. What's going on with this furnace?" The young master smiles and asks, "Well?" The dwarf keeps staring at the furnace, astonished, asking how he did it and why it could melt iron ore just because of 2 holes. Rain replies that it involves the principles of pneumatics. If he wants, he can explain in detail another time, and asks if he can now forge the gears Liesel left. Bram sighs and says he's won. Now that the furnace is working, this old man will forge those gears again, but he warns that if that noble comes to cause trouble again, the protagonist cuts him off, saying not to worry. Even if that noble doesn't come after him, he'll be the one going after the noble. Then they head back to the cabin, walking up to the machine. The young master holds the part in his hand, thinking that this is the central component of the steam engine, and welcomes the arrival of the industrial age. Leah asks if, although this gear looks quite sturdy, it can really withstand the operation of a steam engine. And if it breaks, could something happen to injure him? Iuria agrees and asks if he should ask members of her clan whether they have dragon crystal ore. Rain replies not to worry. Lysander used dragon crystal ore because industrial knowledge was insufficient at the time. Cresta tells him not to speak ill of his master. The protagonist says he should worry about himself, because once the steam engine is fixed, according to their bet, he'll have to become his subordinate. Armando says to talk about that after it's repaired. The young master opens the machine, places the part in its rightful spot, and tells them to now witness a miracle. He moves a lever and the machine begins releasing smoke. The saint is impressed that it worked. Cresta sees that it succeeded, calls out for his master, and remembers her telling him to follow her. While Armando carried a box, she told him to wait for her, and he also recalls sitting and trying to assemble something. His master tapped him on the head, saying she'd told him many times, and he still assembled it wrong. She patted his head and said that if they succeeded, people's lives would be very happy. When his master lost her life, her last words were that she would leave the machine with him. In the present, Cresta is kneeling on the ground, saying that her last wish, her dream, has come true. The boy cries heavily, and Rain says to let him cry for a while, as those tears are the emotions he's suppressed over the years. 3 hours later, the dwarf looks at the machine and says he didn't expect him to actually fix the thing, then asks if it's just a machine that makes smoke. The saint agrees and asks what, besides releasing smoke, this thing can actually do. Bram wonders if this contraption only serves to puff out smoke and scare people while sitting there. The protagonist explains that a steam engine isn't just something that produces smoke, it's the foundation of industrial society. The dwarf asks about the foundation of industrial society and what that means. The young master answers that it can make gears turn and thereby power other machines, whether mills, textile machines, means of transportation, or even future war machines. The steam engine can play an irreplaceable role. The greatest invention of humankind is boiling water. Ayuria says that's amazing. The dwarf says it sounds impressive and asks if it's really as miraculous as he claims. Rain replies that soon they'll understand its true value. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.